Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Kaleidoscope Cafe Podcast. Joining me today is Dustin Cormier. He makes musical and spiritual content online on YouTube and with his band Bosom. Thanks for coming on, Dustin.
It's truly a pleasure of mine, Oscar. I've been seeing what you've been doing online, and I always, everybody get jumping on YouTube is starting off doing some different things, and I always appreciate somebody like you who's just going out there, getting the camera, and interviewing people. I think it's a great, cool thing. I appreciate being a part of the Kaleidoscope Cafe Podcast. Anything that's kaleidoscopically minded, I always appreciate.
Thank you. So do you want to start off at the start? You first made content, am I correct, 2012?
Sorry, say it again.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to start off with kind of the beginning of your journey and how you got started?
Sure. You got it, Oscar. Thanks. So, we had a little preamble chat before we started. I was mentioning that I'd say you're about right. 2012 was a time when I started to, it was crazy times in 2012. People are talking about the world ending and stuff like that. And that was around the time that I was going through some spiritual and a lot of psychedelic experiences. So that I would say that is technically a good place to start talking about when I started finally getting content out onto the media, writing. Like I was writing a bit of songs and stuff, but it was around that time, 2013, where I just got pulled into the world, out of my internal mysticism and into a creative artist expressing what I had been experiencing. So that was around 2013, where I started How to Rock a Campfire. That was my first real thing that I got to contribute to the world artistically and creatively through. How to Rock a Campfire is where I teach guitar online. It's my biggest channel. It's my oldest channel. So before I got into doing How to Rock a Campfire, I guess, I wanted to start with my story. How I would like to frame what I would think of as a very important thematic overtone to Dustin Cormier, to everything that I am. It's acting out of step with the rest of the program.
Yeah.
I would like to, it's almost ecstasy is very centric to the philosophy, the yin and the yang that I'm trying to express here.
Okay.
The yang being acting out of step from within, and the yin being the pattern, the form, the society, the program that everybody is trying to get into.
Yeah.
Of course, as a yoga person, as a creative person, there's so many ways that this metaphor can be unfolded. When you're doing yoga, it's nice to have a yin pattern to move within, because then you have a solid block to apply the water of your ecstasy to guide it, to give it substance. Doing a yoga flow with people, you want to do what the teacher's telling you. You want to breathe when the teacher tells you to breathe. But if you do it to the point where it becomes robotic, a good yoga teacher is not teaching you to be a robot. A good yoga teacher is providing a program for you to act out of step with and in step with.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
At the same time, it's so, whenever I'm doing a yoga class with anybody, the whole class is going with the program. But if I'm really getting a juicy forward bend, and the teacher says, okay, now we're going to go into this posture, and I'm really getting something out of that forward bend, I'm going to allow myself to go outside the program, get the most out of this posture, and then come back to what everyone else is doing.
Right. Yeah.
Same thing with music. When you are playing music, you want to make a program. It's like, okay, everybody, we all want to be on the same chord at the same time. G chord now, C chord now, D chord now, back to the G chord. Everyone has a pattern that we all want to meet on. And any good musician knows to keep with the yin program, the pattern, but also to dance within it. This is why we need lead people, lead guitarists.
Yeah.
And we also need the rhythm section, which is
Mhm.
giving the lead person something to act out of step from. So that's why I kind of wanted to center my conversation of my story on this kind of ecstasy.
Mhm.
So how I would sort of talk about my journey and how I sort of unfolded. First thing I'd like to say, I'm an astrology person.
Yeah.
I'm born on November 8th, which
Mhm.
in tropical Western astrology means that I'm a Scorpio sun. I'm a Leo rising, which means I was born at the hour of Leo. I often like
Okay.
to say that because people can see I'm Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky Lion.
Right.
And for those interested, I have Sagittarius moon, which is also fiery.
Mhm.
Sagittarius is this wandering traveler. And that's
Okay.
how those two are really an expression of this thing that I'm talking about. Scorpio is a fixed sign, and so is Leo. So I
Mhm.
like to have fixed ideas, fixed bones that I move within. But there's the Sagittarius moon in me that feels comfortable looking outside the lines, outside the program. So, how I'd like to start this idea is, uh, how I'd like to start this is talking about my mother and my father.
Okay.
I would say my mother is the yin that sort of enjoys abiding by the social program.
Okay.
My mother is somebody who always encouraged me to be a good boy. I
Mhm.
really had a good boy complex when I was younger. I am sort of a mama's boy, I would say.
Okay.
And so I feel like my mother is an inherent reflection of my own nature in a lot of ways. Although it's funny because I can pass between them. I think that instinctively I'm like my father, but behaviorally I'm often
Mhm.
like my mother. Thank God for the instinct to act out of step with my programming, or
Yeah.
else I would just be a boring person.
Right.
So my mother was this sort of person who wanted to protect me, to make sure that I'm doing the good things, that I'm doing my schooling, and that I could be loved and accepted by my friends and even by the opposite gender. My mother, in fact, a big part of my story, eventually, whenever I tell anybody about my story, it leads at some point to a very decided experimentation and exploration of my sexuality.
Okay.
I'm an LGBTQ person. I'm very open to the idea of transgenderism. I'm bisexual,
Mhm.
and I would call myself a switch. There's
Okay.
often times where I act very masculine in a sexual relationship, and there's times where I act very feminine and receptive
Okay.
in a sexual situation. I like to be able to play both. So my mother really gave me this idea that I should abide by a given program. Everybody will accept me if I don't act too out of step. And I knew this was true, but I also knew the strangest phenomenon. There was always this constant this contradiction in my brain, which is that my mother loved my father, and my father did not act in step with the program. And why was my mother, who's somebody who likes to be in step with the program, infatuated with this man who was such a wild character? So my dad is a bit more of, like my dad is can go between the lines.
Mhm.
And he's too much sometimes.
Okay.
This is why I always like to say both poles are important.
Mhm.
He's a nutty guy. I think I had prepared a picture of my dad just so you guys can kind of see like where I'm kind of coming from here. I know you do a lot of audio podcast stuff. I
It
just
will be
wanted
on
to
YouTube, so people watching can see the picture.
Gotcha. So this is, of all these folks here, this is my dad, one of my dad's bands, and this is my dad here on the left with this
Okay.
swanky little tuxedo suit. He's got the
Yeah.
blonde highlights in his hair and the handlebar mustache. I
Right.
could
Right.
probably dig up a whole bunch more, but this is the one that I sort of wanted to go for. As you can see, my dad is a He was like a rock star kind of guy.
Okay,
He's very
cool.
loud. When you hang out with him, he'll always, you know what? He's always playing practical jokes on people.
Right.
just to make sure that you're not getting too lost in the program.
Okay.
You know, so this is how my dad is. And I've always loved that about him. I've always felt like more close to my mother's nature, which it gave me anxiety when I was younger, that I was a fearful person trying to protect my dignity. I didn't want people not to like me. So I tried to look at what everybody else, what was likable in other people, and tried to abide by that without acting out of step too much, you know, kind of being what everybody wants me to be. So especially when I was very, very young, I was just kind of like a sponge that was just observing reality and making sure that I didn't fuck up.
Okay.
Once, like, you know, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, whatever it is, I started to hit puberty. And I had a lot of friends who just didn't think this way. I don't know. I think I'm just a naturally philosophical person. And I see behavior tropes in people. And I knew that my mother wanted me to be this yin thing. And so I abided by that. But lots of my friends, you know, this nature of me early on, which didn't want to act out of step with the program, I got friend zoned by the opposite sex a lot when I was younger. Even reaching into puberty, I didn't want to ever do anything that would be unexpected. I wanted to have a predictable behavior so that when girls would talk to me, they would know what to expect, and that, you know, I figured that would attract security. Don't worry, honey, I'm not going to act out a line or something. Okay. You know? And so I thought that this would engender, you know, security. I thought that people would like this. But once puberty hit, all of my friends who are guys, I noticed that the ones who got the most appreciation from the opposite sex were people who were like my dad, who didn't think too much about how they came off. They just rolled with things. And sometimes they would be like sexy and even like, you know, like daringly, like going to kiss people and like kiss girls and to talk about like, do you want to go out with me? And they would launch it out and say to a girl, you know, some friends of mine would just, I want to go out with Janie. And it's like, okay, I have no fucking idea how to make that happen. I'm trying to manifest my own things as well. But what they would do is just be like, well, I'm just going to go do it. And they would ask Janie out, and it wouldn't feel like a perfect fit, but they didn't care. Janie didn't care. The two of them are getting kissy, and I'm left holding the bag. Just like, but what if the experience goes bad? What if you look like an idiot after? Okay. And sometimes they did. But lo and behold, I was the only one not being romantic with the opposite sex for a long time, way after everybody else. I was frozen in a lack of bounciness when it came to me approaching the opposite sex, especially because my mom and dad split when I was in grade 2. Okay. So, but my mother, being very compassionate, she knew that every kid needs a father figure. And so she went through a lot of pains and patience to just make sure that my mother had the kids through the week and my father had the kids on the weekend. And I could go see my father, and my mother and father were both very careful never to show their frustration at the other parent. Sometimes my dad would just, blah, that's your fucking mother telling you that, you know? And I'd be like, that's very interesting. Because I knew that my dad was this wild person, and my mother she's all things considered, she's a saint. She's a sweetheart. Okay. She's a great mother. And so this protective thing allowed her, you know, she saw past how she wanted me to be and said, your father's kind of fucked, but he's your father. Like, she never said that, I should say, but this is her saying to herself, their father is fucked.
Maybe you kind of picked that up. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, he's crazy. He's not someone I want to be with anymore. But they are the kids. He's the kid's father, so I will make the time to allow him into their life, because she had a compassion for him still, even though they had this personality differences. So my mother's a good lady. But although she can be overdriven on her particular side of the yin and the yang, this overprotective staying with the program consciousness. So all my friends were going out with people way earlier than I was. I had to really trust that I could experiment with acting out of step with things. And even throughout grade school, throughout high school, people loved me because I was this like eternal friend zone. It was almost like the experience that I imagine a lot of gay men must have, where I can hang out with women and I'm very constantly thinking about not wanting to offend them, not wanting them to feel like I'm I'm hanging out with you. And that doesn't mean that we have to like go out with each other. That doesn't mean I'm going to threaten you with this idea that I want to be with you in deeper than a friendship way. I wanted to show everybody that you can hang out with me and I'm not going to surprise you with this, like, with these feelings. Although, I was blocked and obstructed because really when it comes to romance, those feelings are going to be there and they're going to be what they are. So just launch out your shot to everybody who you feel like it. If they don't like it, no one needs to take that personally or seriously. Just go on to the next thing. At least you went for it. At least you should go for the love. But it's not at this first stage in the game, even throughout high school, this is just how I was. But this instinct of yang, of acting out of step, of fuck the security thing, Dustin, just go and ask the chick for a kiss. This thing was growing constantly, to the point where it got really fat inside of me. While, I had this internal, almost an angst to do something that was very off the given social program. And I didn't know what I was going to do with that. So when I first started kind of going out with people, I started like trying to dress punk, like metal belt and black. And, I'm a rock and roll person. What really got me started on this thing where I noticed that, like, I wanted to still be Mr. Safe Guy who isn't going to jam my ego down your throat by asking you to go out with me. I know it sounds silly, I guess. I mean, I
understand though, yeah.
But at the time, especially, this is just how I thought. And so I wanted to keep both. And the first gift that was gifted to me where I could stand out while still showing that I'm interested ultimately in everybody's protection was playing guitar. I could go to a party and I just became naturally talented at guitar. My whole family is musical. My father's musical and my mom's family is very musical too. So I would jam with the relatives on my mom's side, my grandfather on my mom's side especially. He bought me a guitar and a bass and I just started eating it for breakfast. This is around high school, grade 10, grade 11. I even played the drums, actually. My father, in his band, he played the drums. Mr. Wild, loud, guy.
Okay.
And so I started learning the drums from my father. And there came a point where he was too hard about like lessons. You got to practice. You got to do this thing. And he would get me to practice every day. And eventually I said, like, I got sick of it. And I got sick of my father telling me to do it because he's such a masculine guy. No, Dust, you got to practice your music. And he could be so intense about it. Whereas, if my mother ever told me to do anything, she wouldn't hit me as hard as my father would with the necessity of it. My mother wants to protect me. So she's ultimately like, look, man, if you don't want to do something, don't do it. It's my mother that said, Dust, you were getting all rattled about your dad's drum lessons. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And then I stopped, left music for a while until grade 9, grade 10, picked up the bass and the guitar. And then and it wasn't my dad teaching me. It was me learning chords in simple ways on like the internet and just books, seeing that I can do this chord, seeing that I can play my favorite Pink Floyd and Beatles songs by doing this. And then I went and got lessons. I was very natural in the rhythm because I had already been playing drums a lot.
Right.
So it was here that I could go to parties. I could bring my guitar. I can get really drunk. I used to get super drunk. It's an old instinct of ecstasy in me, where at first I would just almost get blackout drunk at parties, like grade 11, grade 12. But I would bring my guitar, and there was one or two other people around me that would also bring their guitars. One of them was like a guy that all the chicks loved and was just like my dad. Like, he played guitar to get fucking laid, get chicks.
Mhm.
I played guitar to be admired by girls so that I could have them admire me. And then I could go up and talk to them after and say, hey, I noticed that you were hanging out with me while I was playing guitar. Like, how's it going? How's your drink? And I wouldn't be like hitting anybody over the head with this thing. But I learned over time that no matter how attractive I try to be as a man, I find that women ultimately are looking for the man to extend the lance pole, to put it out there, show me that you're interested. And I never did this because I thought that it would be too brash.
Okay.
For a long time. For a long time. It's just crazy when I think about it.
Where did you kind of pick up that idea that it would be too brash? Was there kind of anything other than the kind of yin and yang elements that maybe implanted that idea in your head?
Mostly my mother.
Okay.
She didn't want me to do anything that would be perceived as bad. There's one thing in my mother that's just, again, it's way too much, is that she knows that, like, I don't know, she didn't want me to give off like mean teenage masculine,
right,
like rapey vibes or something like that. So she said, Dustin, like, when you're talking to a girl, you can't be too much, you have to ask her what she wants, what she's interested, what she wants to talk about. And this is just where it was. I don't know if I should have fully blamed it on my mother. Maybe I was just a nervous guy, and my instinct was not to put myself out there, because I was also, I've always been a short guy. I'm the middle child, and I didn't ever want to ask for too much because the young child was kind of getting what she wanted. And my older brother carved a lot of things for my parents. And that's the common thing, right? My brother was the yang. He was pure yang, and he would just go and dive into doing lots of drugs and talking to girls and would be made a fool of, but he would just fucking whatever, man, whatever. I saw his example related to my father of the too much thing, and I said, I don't want to be that thing. I'm going to be the nice, good boy, young brother who doesn't put too much of myself on anybody. This is still in me. I'm a Venus person. In Vedic astrology, I'm ruled by Venus. It's the feminine principle. And I never want to be too much for anybody, at least not without their consent. Why I love art is because you can come to me being too much. You can come to me by choice, because I am way fucking too much in my art, decidedly, because it's because that yang thing had been building while I was young. My art reflects jumping 50 meters away from your own comfortable boundaries. This is what my whole art is all about. But people can come to my art with consent. So at the time, as I'm older now, like 20 years later, I've got so much shit that I'm satisfied about that. While I was younger, I wanted to attract people based on what I am without having to show off. One of my phrases that I always say is that a beautiful bird doesn't need to boast.
That's nice, yeah.
If I'm going around telling girls, hey, I'm Mr. Number One, I'm better than this guy, I'm better than this guy, it's just, I never felt the need to do that. I always just go and play my guitar, and whoever comes to me, it's like, oh, my branch is out there, and hello, little bird. And that's how I've always wanted it to be. Although it still removed me from a lot of potential sexual partners and romantic and erotic conversations in my life. So there was a point eventually where, I started to think about the fact that it was my own fear that was stopping me from, it's like my fear made me want to protect myself and the girl, any girl that I would talk to. I have an instinct to protect them, like my little sister or like my mother. I'm trying to protect them, which means me having this insidious desire to use them is not something I want to do. although true love doesn't come from this place of using. The ego uses the other person's ego, but it's only a gate to more transcendental bonding. So at the ego level, you've kind of got to be like, yo, I want you. I want you. There are plenty of other girls out there, and there are plenty of other guys out here. But I want you, and I want you to want me, and only me. There is an ego game there.
Yeah.
And it was this level that I always mistrusted, and this is why I never, for so long, I went without engaging it, because I thought it was a bad thing. I thought it wasn't compassionate to want somebody and to be wanted. So, long story short, guitar helped me get through this. Music helped me get through this. Listening to bands like Led Zeppelin, Whole Lot of Love.
Yeah.
This guy's on stage shirtless saying, "You're going to get every inch of my love, baby." The girls are going crazy for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, the girls like this man saying that I'm going to put every inch of my four-letter word into you.
Yeah.
So, so I just was like, what the fuck? What do they want?
Mm-hmm.
And so it started to dawn on me that, I could be cheeky like this and sort of like kind of play with this sort of like, yo, what's up, baby kind of energy, and go for it and go through with it without still looking like a fuckboy.
Okay.
Modern, that's how we call it these days, is like. And so even while I started to experiment at this, I never threw it out there too heavy. And at first I thought I was cheating myself because of my fearful programming. But as time went on, I started to attract some girls who really appreciated that I wasn't looking to jam my four-letter word into them with a whole lot of love. I wasn't just about that. I actually cared about the people, and I would only connect with somebody erotically, romantically, whatever, who anybody who I could see myself caring about. I didn't want to just fuck a girl and use them, and then for people to know that I did that, it would feel dirty to me.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So I started to find some few girls who would love me very deeply because I was so concerned with their actually feeling good. I was actually concerned for them. I was compassionate about them. And I started going out with one or two girls just like after high school in particular, where, a lot, like I first got laid, I think when I was like 18 or 19, just with some rock and roll girl who was kind of like the spiky metallic, like, dude, I get that you're trying to protect me, but just like fucking put your hand down my pants already. You're hot. I think you're hot. We've got a bottle of whiskey. Drop it, man.
Was this still when you were like punky kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say so. Like just before, like I graduated high school in 2009.
Okay.
And then 2009, 2010, like after high school is when I met this one particular girl who was basically just like, dude, drop it. I don't want to feel safe right now. I want to feel risky. I want you to be this fucking thing that is taking me. I want to be taken by you. And I want there to be no rails. I want to have nothing to hold on to. Just fucking take me, Dustin. And so I was like, and I just channeled my dad and was like, all right, baby. All right, you want it, huh? Oh, you want it? And then I just started just squeezing and just rocking and rolling. And then we did it. We banged. And then I was lying with her just after in the car and we were talking. And she was just like, cool, thanks, man. I'm glad you got out of yourself there. I was like, oh my God. So am I. Thank you, goddess. Thank you, Venus. I fucking needed that, honey. I gotta tell you.
Right. Yeah.
I wanted the experience of not just, this is a common thing I say. I tell my current girlfriend this, like this, she reminds me of it all the time, is that I didn't want to just, came a certain point where I'm smoking weed, started to get this consciousness where I didn't want to just use the universe and fuck the universe. I wanted to make love to the universe and fuck her good and have her thank me for it. Not just to get my own rock off, but for the
Hmm.
universe to look back at me and say, I appreciate that you took me,
Yeah, yeah.
and I appreciate it and I'm thankful for it.
Hmm. That's so
Uh,
funny because you mentioned sort of seeing your first channel as like an offering to the universe. Do you think it kind of played into that as well?
totally,
Hmm.
totally, for sure. This is just part of who I am.
Yeah,
Even with How to Rock a Campfire, all of the stuff that I do YouTube wise reflects this basic philosophy, which is that like I'm not looking to I don't want to seem like I'm trying to get something out of you. I want
yeah,
you to be getting something out of me, and for me to be happy about that. Best example I could give is that, with How to Rock a Campfire, I've never there was a long time where I didn't even put ads on How to Rock a Campfire.
just
I
for that
didn't
reason.
monetize it just because I didn't want people to have to watch a commercial at the start of my video. I did it for Krishna, which is something that we're going to talk about. I read the Hindu Bible is called the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay, yeah.
And I connected with that through psychedelics. And it was this big swaha. Here is my
Hmm.
service to helping the humans on this planet enter their own heart through this practice of music, because
Yeah.
music can do that. I gave it all for free, and I didn't even want commercials to be at the start. Uh, Eventually, everyone was doing commercials on YouTube, and I could actually make a little bit of coin from it. And I told myself, if I'm making coin off of these things that I've offered to people, I put all this time into it, I'm going to have more time, less time to give to capitalism and the part-time jobs that I've always sifted through, more time to open my heart and give in this way that people actually appreciate.
Yeah.
So this is when I started being like, well, fuck, if I get an extra buck off of YouTube, then I'll do it. But my
Yeah.
initial intention was to give it out there,
Hmm.
give some love out to the universe, and not really expect much reward. That's a huge part of the Bhagavad Gita consciousness,
Hmm.
uh, of Krishna consciousness. You give it out there and you don't ask for anything back.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it does come back to you.
Hmm.
On this point, there's a great story of Krishna that comes from one of the Vedas. It might actually be the Mahabharata, their
Okay.
big book. It's just a simple story. There was a famous market person who came into town where Krishna lived, and Krishna was just a boy. So Krishna is the principle of infinite transcendental wisdom and love, but wisdom is the deeper word. Some people
Okay.
would say love is the deeper word, but they kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Krishna always represents this. And anything to do with Krishna just means that if you trust that you are in the bosom of the universe and that you do good for the universe without asking for reward, it will reward you, because the nature of love is to love, is to love, is to love. So you put it out there, you're bound to get it back, even though there's no guarantee. That's what makes the juiciest accomplishments of mankind, is to do something without really feeling like you might ultimately get it back. So how this story goes is that Krishna is going into town and he's got some grains in his pockets. And as he's got his big pocketfuls of grain. And so he goes to meet this marketplace woman. And the marketplace woman has these various fruits and cheese. As Krishna's going, he's super happy, and he meets the woman, and he looks in his pockets and he realizes that all those little bits of he had huge pockets full of grain, which he could have traded to the woman. But he gets there and he's sad, and he looks at the woman and he says, "I'm sorry, I had a whole bunch of grain for you. I know that you've got the best fruits in the land, but my pockets are empty." So he gave the girl what little grains he could, probably enough for a small cube of cheese. But
Okay.
the woman looks at him and says, she had compassion. And so she said, "You know what? You're here. I saw that your intention was to come here. So I'm going to give you more cheese and more fruits. Take them all." And then so Krishna takes his big piece of cheese and he takes his fruits and he says, "Thank you so much. Can I do anything else for you?" And the woman said, "Don't worry about it." And so Krishna bowed and left. And the woman looks at her thing and she says, oh, well, she puts the grains inside of a little bowl. And when she looks at the grains, she realizes that the grains had turned into emeralds, jewels, sapphires, and diamonds that are worth more than all the fruits that she had at the stand.
Wow.
So it's like, it's a cute story. You know, the Vedas are full of stories like that.
Mm-hmm.
The woman didn't think about it. She just made the love happen, and she got rewarded way more than the effort of the love that she put in.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah.
So that was my intention with How to Rock a Campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, to be honest with you, it's kind of deeply who I am, what we're talking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to talk about this sort of consciousness, but I don't want to do it in a way that makes it look like, you know, when anybody's telling a story like this, I'm all about this Krishna consciousness, and I'm a finger pointing at the moon. Don't mistake me for the moon itself. I'm just telling the story. I'm perpetuating the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah, it's funny you say about that. This is just a slight detour.
Of course,
links
Oscar.
A couple of points that we've hit on. But I actually grew up very near like a place where they would worship Krishna called Bhaktivedanta Manor. And I was introduced to that quite young. And something I found there was the idea of kind of letting go of the material, you know, kind of world and, you know, tuning in spirituality. And as we were talking about earlier, like feeling like you're not asking something of somebody, I used to almost perceive that, this is at more of a younger age, but I used to almost perceive that desire for somebody as wanting to gain a material thing, as like looking outside of myself for validation or for, you know, the love within. So yeah, I've definitely...
Romantically, like in erotically. Yeah. Like trying to ask somebody for that appreciation is like a material desire. It's like a materialistic desire almost.
Yeah, that's funny that you say that, because I've not really heard anybody else kind of mention that. But yeah, I definitely felt that at more of a younger age. Yeah.
No kidding. And that's really where I came from at that age too. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not until you get, you know, in this story with Krishna, there is an exchange of material for material purpose, but it was the doorway to some deeper love. And this is what I'm assuming this is what you must have come to in your experience of being romantic with people.
Yeah.
Right. So cool, Oscar. I love that. That's a great way to think about it. Shall I continue with?
Yeah, go ahead.
My whole shtick. Always feel free to chime in, Oscar. I love your asides. They're great.
Yeah. No, I don't want to interrupt you. You know, go ahead.
No problem. I'm spinning right now.
Awesome.
Eventually, graduated high school, went and banged this one chick, who was cool with me, and she enjoyed the whole thing. And I started to experiment with like, how much can I get this enjoyment of letting go of the fearful security yin paradigm? How can I experiment with letting go of that and experiencing who I am outside of me trying to control every situation perfectly? How much can I let go and risk being wrong and enjoy the satisfaction of having let go of the cerebral grip that my fearful instincts had, and being rewarded with a world outside of my fearful instinct? You know, like there's another Vedic consciousness is that, you know, if you've got a citadel and you're trying to protect the citadel, you know, and imagine that there's like a gold mine like 2 miles away from the city, and everyone in the city is saying, we have to just protect the city, protect it from barbarians and marauding evil people. This is like K2 consciousness as opposed to Rahu. Rahu is like, it doesn't matter. Our city can hold itself there for a minute, but I can go outside of the protection of the city in order to explore what might be out there. There could be a whole gold mine 2 miles away, but you'll never know it if you don't let go of the protection instinct.
Right. Yeah.
And I started finding some gold outside the castle walls, and I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. I wish I had been experimenting with the limits of my protection earlier on, but this is how I found out about this whole thing. So eventually what started to happen is there became a connection between the paradigm of fearful control with women and with romance me experimenting with the risk of being outside of that control and being rewarded for it, I thought, wow, this is something that everybody should experiment with. And it became very natural to me that, thankfully my parents they did drugs when they were younger. My mother did acid. My father did acid. So they had experienced these things. My mom and dad, it's the funniest thing because just the yin and the yang have such funny ways of switching. My mom loved acid. She was a rock and roll chick. I think that the biological instinct made her very careful with her kids, but she was actually, like I say, like I use her as an archetype of this protection and fear. All mothers kind of have that, but within that, my mom was a fucking spicy rock and roll lady.
Right.
And so there's a story of her and my father. They went and did acid at this place called Tweed. It's this big place where they brought like 1,000 hits of acid. And they were making lots of money off of it. In a day where like, fuck, you can get a hit of acids in some places for like $2. They bought a sheet at $2 a hit and they sold it for $5 a hit. They made a shit ton of money and they got to enjoy themselves at this trailer. And my mom was on like 2 hits of acid and just drinking with her friends and having a good time. And my dad took 2 hits of acid and stayed in the trailer the whole fucking day. And my mom came in at some point and was like, Dan, y'all good, bud? And he's just fucking white as a ghost. He's just like, Terry, just come here. And she's like, what? And she sits down and he's just like holding her like this. And it's just like, I'm not having a good time. My mom was like, dude, seriously? Okay. That's fine. You got your weed here. We just, I'll stay with you for 5 or 10 minutes, but I don't want to miss the fucking party going on out there. But my dad was like this. My dad is a glass cannon, very like full of bluster, but he's actually like, can be an insecure guy, So that's just a funny story that I like to say.
Yeah.
Now it's ironic to me that my dad was at that extreme because psychedelics, in my opinion, they amplify this yin and the yang, and it allows you to experience the space between them by them both being amplified. So what I'm going through school. My dad smoked weed. Like, he found out eventually that I smoked weed, and so did my mom. And that happened pretty early. That happened like in high school. And I would go and do it occasionally, but the good boy instinct in me, being so close to my mother's consciousness, was like, this is a fun way for me to experiment with what I am, but I'm not going to make this what I am.
Right. Okay.
Cannabis was something that was this ecstatic principle, which reminded me of my father, but I wouldn't go and I still wanted to do good in school. So I wouldn't get stoned all through the day in school and go to school high where I might get caught by a teacher or get suspended. I never touched any of that shit. I was a good kid in school. I loved learning, and it has served me well because I consider myself to enjoy knowledge, and I love educating myself. My mind's not going to sharpen itself, as I like to say. Eventually, as I'm out of high school, and the people around me were all experimenting with drugs and stuff like that. And the good boy in me was proud that I wasn't one of those people. I'll hang out with you guys. You guys can do your drugs. And like, I'm talking about like people around me doing cocaine, popping like ecstasy pills and fucking listening to rave music and smashing their head against the wall because they're so fucked up.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, okay, that's definitely my dad's ecstasy principle at work there, which is pretty cool, but I am not going to do that. For a long time, I just saw that was too much, particularly because my brother was one of these people.
Right.
My brother got really into hard drugs. He got addicted to ecstasy, and I saw what that did to him. And I was like, well, I'm no fucking fool. I'm going to let my brother burn his hand on the stove. And then I'm going to look at the stove and see, okay, red iron, don't touch the stove. Don't do what my brother did. Because my brother touched the stove and burned himself pretty hard. He's okay now. He's in my band. And he went through a lot of shit, and he has become a very balanced individual.
Okay, that's good.
I'm very happy to say he's a beautiful guy. He's like my best friend.
Hmm.
Uh, at the time, he was going through a lot of fucking shit. And something happened to him, which got was it was a deep eye opener for me in terms of this drug thing, because eventually being with girls was it paled in comparison to the conversation between protection and ecstasy. That romance paled in comparison to the drug experience for me.
Hmm.
The drug experience was this like whole other thing, because I can be with a girl and I'm me and she's her, and we're having this conversation and I'm going into the water, the deep end of ecstasy, but it's still myself that's doing it.
Yeah.
When I saw people doing drugs, what I saw is that the self, which is doing the protecting, is dissolving. And that was frightening to me. I was like, what the fuck is that? Right.
Hmm.
So my brother at some point, I think it was just a bit after high school, might've been in high school still. He was going through some times, man. Fuck, the way he tells some of these stories is so funny, but me and him have a story. And whenever we're sitting around with people and laughing and having some beers, this story will occasionally came up. It'll occasionally come up. This is before either of us had read about Terence McKenna.
Okay.
This is before I knew that psychedelic consciousness was a thing. All I knew is that psychedelics were a thing, and I didn't know what exactly that thing was, but it was weird. I was interested in the weird.
Yeah.
So my brother, one day, he was going through a lot of hard times with drugs. He was similar to me a little bit in the sense that his experiment on the duality between protective instinct versus ecstaticness.
Mm-hmm.
He had the same parents that I did. He explored this plane too, but he went right for drugs.
Right. Okay.
And the conversation was not nearly as externalized where he could see it.
Mm-hmm.
He was so in it that like he wasn't getting the same philosophical insight that I was.
Okay.
Although over time he has come to see the same duality. We talk about it. But my brother was a drug person, and he got really hard into drugs, bad drugs like cocaine and especially MDMA and ecstasy. He got really addicted to ecstasy, which was a pill that at the time it was full of different things. Like they were putting meth, heroin, and then a little bit of MDMA.
Okay, so it was other things as well. Right.
Right. Although he was doing ecstasy pills. He wasn't doing heroin. He wasn't smoking meth. But the ecstasy pills at this time, everyone loved them because it had these three things in them in a particular percentile combination of each, right? So he was like, his dopamine and serotonin were all fucked up. And so he decided one day that he wanted to kill himself. So how he decided to do this, he didn't really know any other way of like how he ought to go about this. Like, I don't know, it was just an instinct one day coming down from fucking ecstasy or whatever. Yeah. He's at his buddy's house, and his buddy looked at him and said, his buddy had these blue stemmed mushrooms, very strong mushrooms. Sean had done them one night and experienced how fucking heavy they are, and just like super high. I'm fucking high. Goes home and he's just trying to talk to mom. He's like, Mom, I just got to go in the basement and fucking lie down. He had experimented with these blue mushrooms, probably did about like 2 or 3 grams to himself. Already almost a heavy, like that's a heavy dose of good mushrooms, right? Like 1 gram of decent mushrooms can really sparkle a lot of people, let alone 2 or 3. So my brother knew that these mushrooms were like what they were. And this particular day, he got drunk and was just feeling blah. And he decided to purchase these mushrooms from his buddy. And his buddy was like, Sean, these are these good mushrooms. Like, I really think you should like stay here with me. just whatever you do, stay here with me if you're going to do these, and we'll chill and it'll be okay. And my brother was in gangster clothing at the time. His hat was backwards that said Hustler on it, and a big Echo sweater. And he was just this type of wigger, type of person. I don't know if to clarify, wigger is like a white person trying to be black, right?
Yeah.
So he was like in this sort of consciousness, listening to hard gangster rap that was violent and shit. And so was his friend. And he had a bunch of people over there that kind of sucked, for lack of a better word. Said, okay, you know what, my dude, I've decided to go against what I said. I think I'm going to get the fuck out of here. And he was like, okay, should I let your mom know that you're going out or whatever? And Sean's just like, don't tell my mom anything. I wouldn't tell your mom that you were doing a thing. So I'm fucking out of here. His buddy was like, dude, you really shouldn't. But Sean was just like gone, like a squid, like trying to catch an octopus. Octopuses can get through all the cracks and shit. You can't hold this guy in when he's gone. So he goes out on like a little bit of mushrooms, and he's drunk and he's just blah. He gets home, and I'm in the basement playing on the computer. I was like doing like I think it was World of Warcraft at the time. I'm sitting and I'm on this computer, and Sean comes downstairs. And he's got this bag of mushrooms, and he's looking at me. And he's looking at me, and he's eating his mushrooms. And I'm like, where are you at right now, dude? He's like, and eating these mushrooms like potato chips.
Jesus Christ.
I think that what he said is that he ate about 15 grams of mushrooms.
Wow. And he'd only done 3 before that.
Yeah, he'd done a few different things.
Okay.
And he had probably done more mushrooms at some point before that. He had done at least 5 grams at some point. He knew what they were about. But what he told me later, I don't know how exactly when this came into his brain, but what he told me is that he wanted to kill himself by eating this bag of mushrooms.
Okay.
And he's laughing maniacally as he's eating these mushrooms, like, "Ooh, I'm going to kill myself." Right. It's pretty heavy. It's almost like Joker level consciousness, you know what I mean? That's where he was at. He had this epic trip. Now this is a whole story in itself that could be its own fucking podcast, but there's 2 sides to this story. There's my side and there's his side. My side is that my brother ate these mushrooms, and I knew what was going on. So my protective instinct came on, and I was like, all right, Sean, you have decided to embark on a journey. I'm going to do my best to just fucking hang out. And he ate the whole thing, then sat down in front of our television, which was on. And this is a television where it's like, channel 3 was cable. It was on, turned it on. It's channel 2, and it's the white fuzz, like the static white noise, right? And he sat in front of that TV for about 3 to 5 hours. And he's sitting there just and just having these gasping moments of like realization to himself. And eventually he goes away from the TV after 3 or 5 hours, and I'm looking at him, and I know where he's at. I've seen him on his drug fucking places. He looks at me and he says, well, I just had a conversation with God. And I was like, great, dude. So it's hard to piece together what happened at this point, but he got up, he became externalized, 15 grams of mushrooms. I don't know how far you go out with people talking about on your podcasts, but I'm going to lay it out. Basically, Sean took off all his clothes, and he's lying on the floor, and he's squirming around like an animal naked. And I'm like, all right, so that's probably not a good thing, but I'm not the type to call the cops on someone. And I was, believe me, the protection and ecstasy instinct right here was going bing, bing, bing in me. Just like, should I call somebody? Is this guy going to fucking eat his own tongue and fucking die? Like, how is this supposed to work? I don't know. I'm not prepared. I'm not trained. I had never done psychedelics. I'd done maybe a little bit of mushrooms once. And I saw myself in a bird's eye view, and I was very interested in them, but they spooked me a little. So I never touched them again. In this moment, I knew Sean was flying. He's on the ground. And what ended up started happening is just like, he's He's on the ground like this, naked, pumping in the air. And he's
Okay.
like, yeah. And he starts yelling out the names of some girls that we knew. And he says, yeah. Like, I'm not going to use any real names. She's like, but he's yeah, Margaret. Yeah, Stacy. And he starts saying these different girls' names. In his mind, he's fucking these girls on the fucking floor, and he starts coming on himself. And he's just an animal mess, man. The human biological apparatus gone completely AWOL.
Yeah. Okay.
You know? So, but eventually he started yelling really loud and be like, fuck. And he started yelling. And then what happened is our arbiter of the protective instinct, my mother, came down and saw him down there. And I look at her and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, Mom. He did some mushrooms. Mom, Sean did some mushrooms. He did a lot. And she's like, how much? And I was like, I'm going to say a lot. He's on a lot of mushrooms, like probably too much. And he's like getting aggressive and he's fucking becoming feral on the ground. And he's like, I don't know. And my mom is just like, Sean, trying to touch him. And he was like, fuck you. And I think he booted her in the stomach.
Wow.
And so my mom was like, okay, this is becoming serious. This is a shitty part of this trip now. Yeah. So he booted her in the stomach and she got spooked and she's like, okay, I need to call Dan, who's my father. So my dad comes down and it was emotional. It was a heavy emotional moment. My dad was looking basically like I was like on the couch and I had a blanket over me because I didn't want to leave Sean alone, but I also did not want to deal with what was going on. So I was just underneath a blanket. My dad comes down and he sees Sean's doing what he's doing. And my dad was just tripping out, just like, fuck, like, oh, my son, just like, and he was mad. And he came over and pulled the blanket off me on the couch. And we locked eyes and he said, get upstairs. And I was like, oh, okay. Went upstairs. This is now out of Dustin's hands. And dad's just like, Sean, just calm down. And Sean was saying, fuck you, Dan. And being really just sort of heavy and aggressive. And he went to fucking punch my dad out. Yeah. So he's just like in a corner, just like eyes going all over the place, a fucking tiger out of the cage. And there was just like, we didn't know where this was going to go. For all I know, I don't know what might have happened if Dano didn't come down. And, you know, so my dad's like, okay, call the cops, tell them that our son is overdosing on mushrooms. Cops got called. Big guys in blue came in, said, sir, how are you doing? And Sean's just like, fuck, just being an absolute animal, like I said. Yeah. Cops came and grabbed him. And Sean, just one of the things I'll never forget is fucking Nazis. That's a common drug experience. You fucking Nazis. Guys in blue come and take Sean away. He goes in the ambulance. They give him something to calm him down. And his heart was palpitating like crazy. Okay. And we were all kind of like freaked out about that. But I wasn't in the ambulance. I just fucking slept it off because the whole thing was super fucking heavy for me. Yeah. And that was I would call that my first drug experience, even though it wasn't me. I saw where drugs can go, what they can do. And I was really spooked about it. You know, he had told me later, like a few days later, that he had this experience where I knew it was the moment when he was looking at the TV, because he turned around to me at that night and said, I just had a conversation with God. Now, how the story goes in his head is that while he was watching the TV, he got transported to a pool, a big pool in his vision. And he was standing and looking down at the pool. And death, the classic Grim Reaper with like the sickle and the skull for a face under a hooded mask, came to him and looked at him and said, do you see this? Sean said, yeah. And Death said, this is where people go when they die. And Sean said, this is why I'm here. And Death gave him the finger, like, come hither finger. Okay. And Sean went into the pool. Flash of light happened. a warp-like vortex experience happened, and he gets transported to a place where it's like white clouds, and he's standing in the middle of this room, and there's a gentleman with a white beard plowing a woman on a couch, fucking a woman on this couch.
Right.
And the man in the beard looks over his shoulder at Sean and says, "Sean, you're not supposed to be here yet."
Okay.
And Sean's like, "What the fuck's going on, dude?" And the guy's like, "Well, I'm God.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
You're not due to be here just yet." And Sean's like, "Yeah, I get it. I killed myself." And the guy with the beard and the white beard and the hair said, "Okay, well, if you want to, if this is where you're at, you can stay here, but you're never going to see your family again. You're never going to see your brother again. You're never going to see any of your friends again. And you are going to exist here." And Sean said, "Well, I don't know. Like, I don't think that I do want to be here. After having saw all this, I would like a second chance to go back if I could." And God was like, "Good." And snap happened. And that's when he turned to me and said, "Well, I just had a wonderful conversation with God."
Right.
And then after that, like, he doesn't really talk about his experience like after that. He knows that he was like hallucinating, that he was having sex with all these different girls and stuff like that. But for him, whenever he tells this story, it was a new life. There's a word when people, it's like born again.
Okay.
Now, he's not a born again Christian by any means, but this was his like born again death and rebirth experience. And that was the main important bit of it all. And he told me all that. And after a few days, a days and a month went by, and it was such a deep impression of my mind, a little bit traumatic, but for some reason it wasn't traumatic in the wrong ways. Like, it was a little bit, but I just had the experience of, like, again, the protective instinct in me versus the ecstatic principle. Something in me that was proud and happy that my brother went into the ecstasy principle and didn't hurt himself, really. Ultimately, he'd had a good experience. Sean turned out around his life after this trip and said, "I actually want to be in life. I don't want to be this shitty gangster, violent person. I want to try to actually live the best of this life as I can, because I know I'm going back to that place anyway. So I might as well do the thing while I'm here." And he got his life on track after that. And I saw that. I saw how going past the protective fear instinct into this ecstasy principle allowed him to live his life with more integrity from his heart, rather than just reacting fearfully to everything. He started being like more open to life outside of the fear principle and the protection instinct. And I saw how good it was for him. It's not like a language thing. It's not like reading a book about going outside of your protection zone. You can't it'll always be an armchair philosophy until you have an ecstatic experience that you can't control and find out that you're okay after that. Right. So I saw that all this had happened to him, and I saw, and like, I understood. I was very happy that Sean could do that. My brother could do that for me without me burning my hand on the red hot stove.
Right. So you saw the effects afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. And best of all, I saw that he didn't actually burn his hand on the red hot element. He actually healed himself. And I thought, like, he burned himself a little bit on the stove, but the sum total of goodness was greater than the sum total of badness, to the point where all the crazy bad elements of that trip just became our funny story that we could tell. Dad got over it, mom got over it, and we all had a laugh at it. And it was a way for us to bond. My parents bonded with my brother after this experience very deeply as well.
Yeah.
So the protective instinct in me saw that goodness of that ecstasy, of that letting it go principle. And it was then that the seed was planted. The psychedelic seed was planted for me. Now, I think this was around high school that this happened. 2 years later, me and my dad and my brother, my dad's a construction guy. That's how he does his thing. He can build a house from the ground up. He knows all the codes in our local area. So we used to buy a shitty old house that's on a good property with good property around it. He'd buy the shitty old place for very cheap. We would fix it together, and then he would sell it for like more than double what he paid for. And this got us to a place where, like me and my brother now own our own house, and we have people renting it so that we get money coming in, and that allows me to exist in a very chill way. Around the time that we started getting this kind of ball rolling, I was out of high school, and my parents were putting pressure on me to go into college and stuff like that. And instead of doing that instinctively, I'd been watching movies talking about like Illuminati, and about like how the financial system is all kind of fucked. And particularly there was documentaries coming out at that time talking about how a lot of parents were pressuring their kids to go to school because of the institution of education. Where I knew a lot of friends who wasted money doing something in their life that they didn't actually want to do. It's the motherly protective instinct, the parents trying to get their kids well set up in life. If your parents don't set you up with what you need to do your best in life, the parents are going to be embarrassed by that. I failed as a parent because I didn't put you through school. And I saw that whole game, and I had already been playing with this like protective thing. So I told my mom and dad, look, guys, like if you guys want to put me through school in like 3 years because I have no direction in my life, we'll talk about it then. I'm still young, still in my 20s. I just want to experience my life.
Yeah.
And so this is what happened, is that instead of going to school, I took a year off. And in this year, I started thinking, okay, what would I choose to be interested in my life? First thing was music and guitars. So what I started doing was going and smoking weed and listening to the music that my parents loved. And my mother, ever my angel of true protection, she unloaded a bunch of her favorite CDs and bands from her era, the 60s, the 70s. There was a lot of psychedelic stuff that came out at that time. One of them was The Doors.
Great band. Right?
Listening to The End. And I didn't fully comprehend The End while smoking weed and listening to it. It was eventually I went and did mushrooms and listened to The End by The Doors, and it fucking blew me apart. But before that, my mother gave me all her music to listen to. And they all kind of had references to ecstasy and this sort of consciousness of rock and roll. And somehow, I don't know exactly what the connection was, but I did mushrooms, and I had that experience where I saw a bird's eye view perspective of myself in the room. And I was smoking weed at the time, and generally, and weed was illegal.
Right.
But my parents, like, weed is now legal in Canada, but my parents, my father, my mom didn't smoke weed. She didn't like weed, but my dad loved hash. And he could just go and he got this like Afghani black seal hash, and he would smoke it with cigarettes. He would put it on the tip of a cigarette, and it would let loose a stream of cannabis smoke, and he would put that stream inside of a bottle, and that bottle would get filled with smoke, and you would smoke. We called them bottlers, and then you would smoke that. So my father was like, "Don't smoke too much weed, Dust. Don't throw your life away. Now come smoke this weed with me." So this is my dad being the coyote trickster, this sort of laughing, don't be like your mother. Don't be too fearful. If you want it, you like weed, I'm smoking weed too. Let's do it together. If I know at least if you're doing it with me, You're not going and doing it in a field where you could get busted by the cops.
Yeah.
And my mother was like that too with us drinking. Just drink inside the house, drink in the garage. At least we know where you are. And we know that you're not going to get busted for being delinquents and doing something stupid. So my parents were cool like this. They nestled. What happened is that my own parents became like my father, in the sense that my parents, both of them, were allowing me to go outside the lines of my protective instinct.
Mm-hmm.
So I could smoke weed at my mom's place and listen to music. And she was like, okay, Dust, just, as long as you go to school tomorrow, not high tomorrow morning, then smoke your weed, whatever. And it was at this time I began to get this consciousness that my parents were allowing me to do that, but other parents were not allowing their kids to do that.
Yeah.
So we had some friends coming over and just be like, look, man, just like, my mother was not stupid. She wanted to try to tell the other parents around what was going on, kind of thing. Although if there was a kid whose parents wouldn't jive with it, my mom would be like, all right, just, whatever. Mom would allow those kids to smoke weed at my place, which kind of gave my place. There was once or twice where another parent was like, you're going to go smoke weed at the Cormier's place. It was this stupid thing, right? But ultimately, my mom was savvy. She was like, look, that's that parent's thing. We never got busted by cops or anything like that. So it was all Gucci. And the ecstatic principle in me was growing and growing and growing and finding roots, even in my own parents and my father smoking weed with me. And it was illegal. Mm-hmm. So I knew that the government was perpetuating something that even my own parents knew was overblown and overdone. This began another dialogue. Even the government and the society that I'm living in has this protective instinct. Mm-hmm. And there will be times where I can engage my ecstasy principle in doing things that could land me in trouble. I wasn't interested in being a criminal for a criminal's sake, but I felt good smoking weed. And I began to read literature about smoking cannabis, because for me, it became this swanky thing of me being a little bit wild, but still being nice.
Yeah.
And this is where I became a hippie.
Mm-hmm.
The hippie is somebody who enjoys their consciousness of their own things, enjoys sex, and can be a bit hedonistic, I guess I could say. Mm-hmm. I can be a bit hedonistic even if the government and society in general is trying to control that animal impulse. Just because we all as a society try to control that animal impulse doesn't mean we want to throw away that impulse completely. We don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater here. Mm-hmm. Society wants us to be controlled, but we also want to have a good time.
Yeah.
Support good times. Thumbs up. So everybody's still on that vibe. That's why alcohol is still legal. Mm-hmm. Although in the literature I was reading, I was finding out that alcohol is not good for you. It turns you into an alcoholic. And in the long run, I began to read literature which makes this argument that alcohol can actually make people more subservient, sheep-like. They think less. They don't use the God-given intuition within them. They just ride on this alcohol fun pleasure principle. And there's an instinct in me where I just knew, as I'm, the yogi in me, even like I started doing yoga around when I became a hippie. Being a hippie, I got into the Beatles, and George Harrison from the Beatles was a spiritual person. He was all about yoga. Mm-hmm. They went to see the Maharishi, who was an Indian guy who was teaching transcendental meditation. And this completely stuck to my ribs. Mm-hmm. And I saw that soft hippiness, but wearing ecstatically colored clothes, was a way for me to be a beautiful bird that could attract people without being too much of a bad boy. Mm-hmm. I'm being a bad boy by smoking weed, but I'm not actually a bad boy. I'm still a good boy. So all of my things that I want to be are getting checked here. Mm-hmm. It's when I became a hippie, I started reading hippie literature. And this is when the doorway to psychedelics came to me. where I started to realize that psychedelics was like cannabis, and they were organic. Mushrooms is an organic experience. Acid, I thought at first, was made in a lab, so maybe it's not quite as good. But as I read the literature, I got into chemistry. One of my things that I loved in high school was chemistry. And I realized, like, Timothy Leary and Ram Dass, they were synthesizing the chemical in mushrooms. Chemical in mushrooms is psilocybin, which means it was synthesized in a lab, but it was organically sourced.
Right.
So just because something was synthesized in a lab doesn't mean it wasn't organically sourced, and that therefore that it's synthetic and toxic. I read about how acid is made out of, ergot mushroom fungus, which is technically a toxin, but you can extract LSD from ergot and it might as well be psilocybin. I mean, that's its own sort of conversation, right? That gave me the idea that acid might not be that bad. Plus the fact that my parents did acid when they were younger. And, the way they talked about it was that it's not an addictive substance. My dad sure as fuck didn't do acid again after that trip inside the trailer.
Okay, right. Never
my
again.
Mom, pretty much never again. That was his last time doing psychedelics of any sort.
Okay.
So my mother enjoyed it. My father hated it and never did it again. Neither of them kept doing it out of some compulsive addiction. And the literature I was reading was telling me that it employed people towards this ecstatic principle. It's not about the instinct for protection. You're not escaping from reality. You are challenging yourself to alter your consciousness so that you can see reality outside of the neuroprogramming which you have developed incidentally through your life, through childhood, and through being in our society. It was something that instigated an ecstatic principle of wild ecstatic consciousness outside of any protective programming instincts in society and in the individual. So when I was reading about all this, I just started to feel like this is my quiet little way of going and exploring my own ecstatic potential and getting outside of myself, getting outside of my own limits. And this is when I got into psychedelics. I started going to rivers. The biggest trip that allowed me to crack through all of this, before I even started going to the river. Okay. I think this is about 2009, 2010, very freshly after high school, after my brother's big, deep mushroom trip. About a year or two after that, I was doing little bits of mushrooms and feeling them and experimenting with them and experiencing them. And I was very curious about acid. And I fancied myself to be a little bit of a consciousness chemist in my own way.
Yeah.
I started getting some legal derivatives for psychedelic things online just to see what they were about. And one of those things is something which I would love to talk with you and your viewers right now about, something that eventually I'm going to be making videos about this. It is my greatest psychedelic ally. What it is it's something called Hawaiian baby wood rose.
Dude, this is crazy. Okay.
You mentioned... Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned George Harrison.
Yes.
I mentioned the temple near where I live earlier.
Yeah.
He founded that temple. So that was a big part of my journey.
Wow.
They had his guitars there. He funded the whole place. So they had a garden dedicated to him. Really beautiful place. But that kind of turned me on to spirituality, which then in turn, through listening to spiritual music that also had elements of psychedelia, turned me on to psychedelics. And so the first thing I ever tried was, psychedelic-wise, was Morning Glory Seeds, which also has LSA, the same compound as Hawaiian baby wood rose. Yeah. Yes.
Wonderful. Wow, what a start. Yeah, dude. So that was your first psychedelic experience?
First ever. Very young, I think, at the time. I visited that temple around kind of maybe age 9, and so that implanted kind of the idea in my head initially. Then I started listening to psychedelic music around age 12, 13, tried Hawaiian baby wood rose maybe 15-ish.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was kind of the start of my journey, yeah. Um,
Wonderful, Oscar. So, man, LSA and the derivatives of the plants that carry them have
mhm.
become my favorite psychedelic ally.
Yeah, they were a big one for me when I started. I did it quite a lot, and I found it really insightful with the trips I
Yes,
would have from it. How did you kind of find your Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose kind of experience?
very much the same. They reminded me of like a babbling brook, like a river. And I would do Hawaiian Baby Woodrose as well as Morning Glory is the same, but I got a big bag of like 500 Hawaiian Baby Woodrose, or
Hmm.
like not something like 200, $300 when I
Okay.
had a bit of money. And I went on Arrowid, which
Hmm.
everybody on this cafe ought to know about. It's an important website. And I was reading about dosages, and I found that you had to do about 100, 200, 300 Morning Glory seeds, but that Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose was different. That you only had to do about like, really 3 or 4 to start to get an effect. And then
Hmm.
higher up, you got to do about like 8 or 9 to get a really ecstatic experience. So I started experimenting with Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose because I got this bag of them, and I tried little bits, and I thought they were fucking weird.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up in my experience was like I think in past lives that I have done mantra work and yoga work before. One of the things that was preeminent in my brain was a mantric. It's like vague Vedic hymns that I didn't understand. Maybe it was Sanskrit, but I don't know. Maybe whatever it was this like an Indian man whispering like this long drone of word consciousness, ecstatic language consciousness in the back of my brain. And it
Hmm.
wasn't me doing it. So what the hell is this thing? Is this a
Hmm.
spirit? Is this the spirit of the plant talking to me? Are these seeds removing the filtration of my present incarnation and revealing glimmering seeds of past incarnations? I didn't know what the source of that experience was. Um, so I was playing around with them a little bit, and I thought that they were weird. Uh, and I also did a little bit of I did a little bit of mushrooms around this experimental time, like I said. Now, what I wanted to do is I just wanted to be clever. There was a guy that lived with us who's my dad's friend, and he's an old man who just made cannabis concoctions himself, like hash. He made weed oil and stuff by using
Okay.
isopropyl alcohol. Now, isopropyl alcohol is something which I read and understood is something that you can make to make weed oil, and you can smoke it, and you won't necessarily absorb the particulates of the minerals that are in the isopropyl alcohol, which are toxic for you. You shouldn't
Hmm.
ingest any oil that's made from isopropyl alcohol because the alcohol will evaporate, but it will leave
Other,
minerals,
yeah.
toxic minerals behind. Now, I didn't really know, like I knew that, but this is just how this happened this day.
Hmm.
Mr. Chemist, I can take it. I'm curious. I want to play with this. So I had my Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose seeds, and I also had another plant called Calia Zacatchichi.
Okay. I haven't
It's
heard of
called,
that.
yeah, it's like a Mexican dream herb.
Okay.
One of the many, legal psychedelically derived
Hmm.
substances that I had just acquired and was just experimenting with because they were legal and I could
Hmm.
get them. I didn't have all that many mushroom connections or acid connections at that time. I was just going into it. I didn't know how to find psychedelics, but I could get these legal ones online that were almost psychedelic, and some of them were. Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose is psychedelic. It has
Hmm.
LSA in it. So I got these Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose seeds. What I decided to do was grind up probably about like, I don't remember. Like I've got my notes on this, but I'd say maybe about like 40 or 50 of these Hawaiian Baby Wood Rose seeds. Grind them out. I ground them up into a powder using a coffee grinder,
Hmm.
along with probably like 5 grams of this Calia Zacatchichi. Poured it all into a casserole dish of isopropyl alcohol, stirred it around. No, actually, I would have put it in a mason jar. I put the seed matter, the ground up seed matter, the ground up herb, this Camellia zaccharichichi, in a mason jar, filled it with isopropyl alcohol, would stir it, let it sit in the fridge for a couple of hours, bring it out, stir it, let it sit in the fridge. And I did that for about 2 days, popped it out, opened it up, poured it into a glass casserole dish, and in a place where nobody was lighting cigarettes or on anything like that. I put it in the backyard, and I told all my friends, hey, everybody, this is fucking serious. You'll blow our place up if you light a cigarette around this little casserole dish. And people were like, Dust, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, it's an experiment. It's an experiment. Just, I'm serious. But Flop understood it. So Flop was my dad's friend. Okay. We called him Flop. His name is Ian.
Okay.
Flop understood it. And so he put it in a place, and he put a sign on it that said, no fucking cigarettes for 2 days out here. Because he was very serious, because he was a chemistry guy too, interested in these sorts of things. He did this all the time with cannabis. So he had a place where he could do it, where he did his own weed oil. And I gave it to him and said, just make this happen. And eventually all of the watery residue evaporated. And what I was left with was this streak of amber colored oil at the bottom. I scraped it with a razor blade into the middle and just let it sit more and more. And after about a day, it became completely jet black.
Okay.
Like jet black ink, just a little splotch of it in the middle of this casserole dish.
So like the whole casserole dish down condensed into one.
Into this little puddle in the middle.
Yeah.
I took that black oil and I put it in a pill, and there was enough left over for another pill. So it was like a little vegetable glycerin pill type thing. One full one, and then I think another half one.
Okay.
And it was in my fridge for just a little while, and I was just like, fuck, I don't know what the hell I got there. But I didn't think it was going to be that strong. I was like, this is probably just going to be I'm trying to tread lightly. I was telling myself, I'm trying to tread lightly into this world. It's my first experiment. But I've got the full pill, and I just didn't think it was going to be anything. It was one night where I decided to take this pill, and it was a Saturday, and we had a few people over at the house. I didn't really tell anybody that I was going to do this. I didn't want to freak anybody out. I didn't want anybody to. It's my first, when you're first getting into psychedelics and you tell people, hey, everybody, I want to have an experience inside my room, and I don't want anyone to bug me. You know that there are some people who your friends who might come up and just be like, either try to mess with you or just be like, yo, Dust, y'all good in here, man? Or whatever. I just didn't want any of it. So I didn't tell anybody about it. But everyone knows me and loves me at the house. I'm always there kind of chilling with everybody, playing guitar and shit. This particular day, I was just in my room. I took this pill. I had smoked actually. I wrote this whole journey in my notebook where basically I took the pill, was walking around the house, just kind of talking with people and stuff. It was a very big house. And people were doing bottlers, BTs and stuff like that. And I smoked 2 BTs about a half an hour after I took this pill. And I started feeling a little bit green in the gills. Just like, it happens when you smoke really strong hash. I almost felt like there was too much cigarette in my system. Okay. And I just thought I'm just kind of feeling a little bit green. It's enough hash for me. I'm just going to go upstairs and sort of chill. So I think everyone kind of knew, like there was 2 or 3 people there who knew that I had done that. And they're like, okay, Dust, just go chill. I go upstairs, and there's like a main upstairs foyer, the bathroom, 2 bedrooms, and then my bedroom. I went up and went pee, and I started to like pew 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 pew. Like I started to just kind of feel like I was getting sucked into the floor. Yeah. And I'm on the floor of my bathroom after I peed, and I'm just kind of here like, maybe this is more than just the hash. And I started to get a little bit worried because I was like, I did take this pill. I am having this experience. Yeah. Okay. We're on. Yeah. We're on. Okay. This is kind of happening. So I got out of the bathroom and I went into my bedroom. I lied on my bed, which was just on the ground, a very low mattress on the ground in my room. And I just sort of lied down, and I started feeling revved up and amped up. And then it came on. And what it was it probably was a combination of the Zacatecece with the Hawaiian Baby Woodrose. But I would say the Zacatecece had its own. I had smoked and drank tea out of the Zacatecece. It's the most bitter fucking thing you'll ever taste in your life. And I had very subtle dreams on it. Now I'm swimming in this consciousness, and it started to ramp up. And it was basically like a high-end salvia trip that started coming to me, where I just would close my eyes, and I'm like, I started convulsing, like shaking in my body, just like having an ecstatic shaking fit. And what happened is what I imagined is that there's like black all around me, and in the middle is this illuminated warm glow of what I would call almost like a Kabbalistic cube, this black polygonal cube full of multiple different colors. And I could hear myself breathing, and my breath in my vision was spewing, the sound of my breath was spewing visions.
Wow.
And I could hear outside, I could hear birds, and it would come into me as a sound vision. I would hear it, and it would be, the actual things I was hearing in the house, I would hear as this vision. But then also the people downstairs, I was also hearing laughing and stuff like that. And these were these brown colored waves of like word matter that were hitting my whole body and exploding into fractals.
Wow.
And this gyrating polygon at the center of this thing started just spinning and erupting into crazy fractals of sound vision. And the whole time I was lying there, I was just like, this is way too much. This is very uncomfortable. And it started to hurt my stomach. So I was getting this cramps, which Hawaiian Baby Woodrose can do.
Yeah.
They can give you these cramps. In my experience, most times when I have a deep Hawaiian Baby Woodrose experience, I don't know if it's specific to my body or whatever, but
I've experienced leg cramps. So it's interesting. Yeah. I think it's pretty
spasms.
common.
Yes, I believe it is common as well. So I was having like fits, like ecstatic, orgiastic fits in my fingers and my toes, squeezing my feet and my hands. And from the center of me was this dragging pain. It was ecstatically painful. It didn't feel like anything other than my own stomach just wringing itself from the inside. But all of my sensations were magnified. So I was kind of in hell.
Yeah.
I was in like a nervous system hell experience. And I was getting twisted out from the inside of my guts. And at some point during this whole fucking thing, my brain decided to think of the fact that, I did use isopropyl alcohol in that oil. So I once I told myself that, I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not dying. And so I thought that I was dying. I really thought that this was something I fucked up. Like the ecstatic father principle was now killing my protective mother principle. And I was burning myself up, and I did something wrong. Bad boy, Dustin. I fucked up here. But I was still, there's an instinct in me that wanted to control. Somewhere along this whole line of consciousness, I was embarrassed, and I didn't want anybody to feel like that I was dying and that I could have accidentally killed myself here. One of my buddies came from upstairs and said, "Dust, are you okay in here?" Opens the door, and I'm like lying down. My whole body was convulsing before this. I'm lying down. He comes in and says, "Dust, are you okay?" And I go, I let it all go. For this moment, somehow I pulled myself out of it, pulled my pillow that was on my face, pulled it up and said, "Yeah, dude, I just smoked a bit too much hash. I'm just kind of like just chilling out." And then my buddy was like, okay, man, that's all good. Like, are y'all good? You want a bucket or anything like that? And I was like, "You could just get me a bucket, but I don't think I'm going to throw up. I think I'm okay." So buddy's like, okay, goes and gets me a bucket. My good buddy, nice guy, puts the bucket beside me. And he's just like, "Well, we're all downstairs. You look like you're okay." Thankfully, he didn't I guess he didn't see my face. It was dark. If he had seen my face, it was probably white as a fucking ghost. So buddy is like, "All right, Dust. Well, we're downstairs. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm already feeling better. I'm going to be down there soon anyway. He leaves, and I exhale, and I close my eyes, and then I'm back in it. Oh, hello again, mysterious death ecstasy principle. Nice to see you again. At some point, I'm just sitting here, just fucking dying, so far as I know. And there came a point where I was just moving my body in a rhythm, like a maraca, shaking like this. And it didn't make me feel like physically any better, but I at least felt like I could move to a pattern. My body was ecstatically moving snake-like, to a pattern where I'm just like this, jiving, jiving, jiving. And this pattern was the only thing that I had. It was the only grip I had. It was like I was in my internal vision was this splattering, sputtering ecstasy of just moving, kaleidoscopic, globulous flesh becoming alien creatures and faces and eyes and all these things, like an ecstatic DMT trip, which, so I was just sitting here going through that and shaking my body with it. Once I got my body into a place where I was convulsing in a way where I could breathe in, breathe out. Once I got the grip on my breath and my body convulsing, it was still so much. But at least when I was in this rhythm, I had a form for this ecstasy. And once I could get a form for this chaotic ecstasy that was lying on top of me, I said, okay, I can't control this. And I very well might die. So I'm going to let it go. If anybody comes in right now, they're probably going to think that I have to go to the hospital. Maybe I do. I don't know. All I know is that I'm so pinned to the floor right now that I can't do it myself. I don't really want to go to the hospital, but if it does get to that point, I'm okay with it. If I die, I'm okay with it. And I just sat there like that, convulsing with this rhythm, holding on to my breath for dear life, just being like, it's okay. If I have to die, I can go. If I have to die, I can go. If I have to die, I can go. And eventually the convulsion of the Hawaiian baby wood rose that was in my stomach, after about probably 3 mean fucking hours of this, it let go of my stomach. And so I could relax. I was still shaking and breathing and being just so happy that the pain in my stomach stopped. So ecstatically happy that I wasn't going through what I was going through. And I was flushed with gratitude and just thinking in my brain, like, I have a new respect for this. I have a new respect for life, just like my brother did. I had the experience that my brother had. Not really the same. And I'm not looking to, it's not a competition, I just, in my brain, like I had gone somewhere where I was in such a state of nervous system ecstasy. I couldn't control it. I made it through the fire and I was full of gratitude. And I, just one of the things I remember thinking about is that like I was lying, and I think that the sun was starting to come up at this time, or I could see that there was like kind of a light outside. So it might have been longer, actually. I might have been in this thing for like 6 or 7 hours.
Okay.
The light came in from the other window, and I could let go of the convulsions. I was looking out the window, and I was on the positive side of this psychedelic ecstasy now. And I remember thinking that I am so happy to be alive. I'm so happy to be on Earth. I'm so happy for my body. I'm so happy for my family. I was thinking about my father and my brother, and I'm a sentimental person naturally, but the feeling like I was going to die while I was running through it. And it was particularly when I was like, okay, if I have to let go of my brother, I love him so much, but that's okay. If I have to let go of my sister, I love her so much, but it's okay. My mother, I love her so much, but it's okay. I can let go of all these things because I have to. This experience is forcing me to be okay with death.
Yeah.
I have to let them go because I have no choice. It's happening. Here it is. What else am I going to do about it? And throughout all of this, I got this deep positive experience of realizing that, like, I love all of these things. I love who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking that in past lives, I had done this kind of thing before. I had
Mm-hmm.
ingested some kind of psychedelic medicine, ran through the rigmarole of this crazy convulsive compulsion ecstasy, and there was like some kind of like golden eagle spirit of the spirit of transformation itself
Mm-hmm.
that was like on my third eye, just saying, just like, hello again.
Yeah.
Not hello for the first time, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like you are connecting to something that you've always done in your past lives.
Mm-hmm.
Hello again. And I saw I don't know if it was a spirit. I don't know if it was my own brain hallucinating that my own consciousness is speaking to itself. I didn't know. All I know is that I felt the golden presence of some eagle-like spirit of something. And it didn't feel menacing at all. It just felt like this thing was an ambassador of something that had come to say that, like, you just knocked on a very old door and it's nice to see you again. And I
Yeah.
hope I see you again. And I said the same thing to it. And like, I was just totally godsmacked. And that
Yeah.
was my first real full on, and that was my heaviest. I've never gone as deep as that. I don't know if I'm ever going to go back there again. I would
Yeah.
love to get some kind of like oil, some kind of stripping agent, a chemical that doesn't have what isopropyl alcohol has. I would love to do that again.
Well,
Uh,
you can extract LSA with just cold water, I believe, but I don't think it would
yes, you
be that
can.
effective as what
Yeah,
you did.
I think so. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Maybe it was the Zacatechy that did it. I don't know. I have my own method for doing Hawaiian baby wood rose now. What I do since then, since this very ecstatic experience, what I've done instead is I'll take Hawaiian baby wood rose. I'll do about like 5 or 6 of them, grind them up into a powder. I'll put
Mm-hmm.
them in lemon juice, let them
I've heard
hang out.
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I let them hang out in lemon juice along with either acid or mushrooms or both. That
Okay.
is my trifecta. I'll take a
Mm-hmm.
hit at whenever I go out and do a trip with myself. I don't need to do the young man exploring like I did in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to bring, like, I've been on that journey. Now
Mm-hmm.
every journey that I go on is more of a reminder.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'll do a hit of acid and 2 grams of mushrooms and about 5 or 6 Hawaiian baby wood rose. I'll grind up the seeds and the mushrooms together in a coffee grinder until it's a powder. Put it in the lemon juice. Put it in the fridge overnight, stirring it. Wake up the next morning, stir, stir, stir. Take the hit of acid. Wait about like 15 minutes. Then drink the mushroom Hawaiian baby wood rose concoction. And then I'll go and I'll have my trip.
How do they interact taking all of those at the same time?
Well, acid and mushrooms, I've always been a huge fan of. I've been always a huge fan of that combination. The mushroom is much more in my body, and I find it gives me that almost Indian sort of
Mm-hmm.
Om mantra kind of like ecstatic spinal flush consciousness. Acid is more of the light show, and it's its own philosophical thing that can be very clean and pure and beautiful. And the acid is the nice one because acid is such a philosophical drug for me. Acid is what I love to sit and I'll have my notebook. I'll do a hit of acid and I'll be smoking weed. And
Mm-hmm.
I do yoga, especially for me, for everyone listening, doing yoga while I'm coming up, having a delicious body squeezing all my organs, breathing through my spine and flushing out. And then the psychedelics are essentially amplifying the natural psychedelic experience that rests inside of all of us. The Indians have always known that you can reach transcendental ecstasy using just your breath and doing yoga and doing handstands and things that will break through the
Mm-hmm.
body's natural way of being. So for me, I would do yoga and these kinds of things. And it was the Hawaiian baby wood rose that really compelled a certain brand of spirituality where it felt like the universe was speaking to me. I could get this on mushrooms and I could get this on acid, but nowhere was it more prevalent than when I do Hawaiian baby wood rose. Now, even this many years later, mushrooms is always an intense experience of my own energy body.
Mm-hmm.
Acid is always an intense experience of my own energy body, more mental. Acid for me is a bit more mental, whereas mushrooms are a bit more energetic. Your mentation is still a part of your energy body. Your psychology is a part of your energy body. Hawaiian baby wood rose is the one additive that I take where I start to perceive that there is a mystical unfoldment that is almost already set in play for me in my destiny, in the things that I experience when I go out. Like I go down to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I take my skateboard or my bike and I go out onto the beach and I'll listen to music and I'll hear a song that's this perfect song for this perfect moment. And I have this experience where something is that there is some kind of handrail there. There is some kind of mystical feeling like my spirit guides have led me to this moment so that I can have this particular experience. And I even have conversations with my own consciousness on Hawaiian baby wood rose. Whereas the other drugs that I take always feels like it's me talking to me.
Right.
Hawaiian baby wood rose has this, it instigates this conversation with, I've done ayahuasca since, and that's its own trip.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Peru and did ayahuasca. And ayahuasca to me resonates with Hawaiian baby wood rose very deeply, even though they're pretty chemically different. Ayahuasca is more chemically similar to mushrooms. Psilocybin only has one molecule away from DMT. But when I was doing ayahuasca, I had this deep experience that the human intelligence principle is like an avatar sourced at the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And our planet is one particular garden for this intelligence principle. And so I love Timothy Leary's Game of Life. It gives you this whole build up that intelligence agents are seeded from certain stars who come to the planets, and that intelligence agency that is human needs to get in touch with the organic agency of the particular planet. There's intelligence agency and then there's organic agency. And the intelligence agency has to proliferate over top of the organic agency, but the organic agency has to build a foundation underneath the intelligence agency. The intelligence agency of consciousness, almost like the yang ecstatic principle, needs to have a ground on the planet, on the physical body that you've been given, or else it's going to crumble. The planet will crumble if we don't get in tune with the environment, with the ecosystem, with the animals, with the nature of the planet that we're living on. This is what ayahuasca taught me. Hawaiian baby wood rose taught me the same thing, but it didn't reveal itself with Hawaiian baby wood rose. Ayahuasca just came right out and said, "Hi, I'm Earth. You're human. Nice to finally meet you."
Okay.
So one of my deepest Hawaiian baby wood rose trips that I've had since this particular ecstatic one, I did an experiment where I was up in my room at my mom's old place. I was by myself and I was doing yoga. It's always when I'm doing yoga that my brain on psychedelics starts to think about all the important things. And I usually have to be like, I'm going to do my yoga first, because I know after I do my yoga, I'm going to be able to write either way. So this was probably like 2 grams of mushrooms, a hit of acid, and probably about 5 or 6 Hawaiian baby wood rose. I was doing the yoga, and it was at one point where I did a good one. I did a good yoga session, and I'm writing in, what I always do is I write in my book, and I write these mystical little aphorisms, which I love to look back at when I'm sober. I smoke weed, and I'm like, oh, that's what I meant by that.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
always find this is my life. At a certain point, I was a psychonaut,
Hmm.
and I would get into these ecstasies where I'm thinking about reality, about myself, and about society, and about the planet, and about cosmic consciousness in ways that I know I'm not going to be able to think about it in the same way once I'm done the psychedelics. So I'm somebody who has always tried to write songs at some point when I'm on the psychedelic thing. If I
Hmm.
can't write a song, at least I can write some little aphorism, some
Yeah,
writing, some psychedelic consciousness that can get me to where these psychedelics are trying to get me without necessarily taking them. Because I
yeah,
want to be an ambassador for the pure, unadulterated consciousness of the planet and the pure, unadulterated consciousness of the center of the Milky Way galaxy, the absolute intelligence principle. And I want them to be shown to everybody on the planet and to see why psychedelics are such an important gate. Because our own brains have a filtration system that is survival based. When you've got to fly in a cockpit, if you're on a hit of acid and you're thinking about being a baby and laughing like an infant, you're going to kill us all because you need to be focusing on survival mechanism consciousness.
hmm,
Now, everybody has since fucking, 2000 years ago, when the Eleusinian mysteries stopped happening, all us humans have let go of the ecstasy principle and been purely all about getting our grain into a silo so that we can get our ticket from the governing agency body so that the king will allow us to have our lives without us being killed by marauding barbarians. We're all on this survivalistic impulse, and we've forgotten about the importance of the ecstatic principle. And I am doing psychedelics, and I'm realizing that everybody else in society, for the most part, is still like my mother. This protective instinct, this fearful, I can't go too wild. I can't unfold too much of what's inside of me because it's wild. It's
hmm.
uncontrollable, and I need to be controlled. And so at this point in my life, I knew that there were doorways to stabilize the protection instinct just enough, but also to explore and experiment outside of our fearful protection instinct to survive. And it was at this moment that I realized, around this time, where I realized that psychedelics are a safe, non-toxic way to explore the parameters of the limits of your own protective instincts. And that this was something that's very good for everybody. So this is why I've always been this type of person who's an ambassador channeling the ecstatic principle for all us humans.
It's quite shamanic in a way to go into that
Yeah,
journey and try to bring things back. Yeah.
that's a great way to put it, Oscar, is shamanic and transformative.
Hmm.
Shamanic is what it is.
Yeah.
The shaman is the person who does what we're talking about. They are willing to go and put their hand through the mysterious blue fire and say, look, everybody, it's not melting me. As everyone else is just like, no, man, I'm not touching it, dude. You go do it.
Yeah.
So in this one particular trip, I'm at my mom's place. I do my yoga, and some kind of mantric consciousness is building up from my spine and inside my consciousness. And I decided to do an experiment where I got my notebook and I decided to have a conversation with what is essentially myself. But myself is in an altered state of consciousness. So I'm just going to I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just going to try this dialogue. So I
Okay.
said, hello. I wrote it in my notebook.
Hmm.
Hello. I wrote it back to myself.
Yeah.
Who are you? And what I responded with was, I don't know why I responded with this. This is just the first
Hmm.
thing that came to my brain. I wrote, I am an Egyptian magician princess from
Okay.
10,000 years ago.
Wow.
And I was like, why am I here is what I wrote. And what it said was, we are here to experience the importance of ecstasy. Just kind of like, like that's what I kind of that's what I wrote. And I wrote a few more things. Like I kind of wrote to myself that at some point I realized that I'm a very sexual person, and doing a lot of these sorts of experiences sort of pulled this out of me. And I always was pulling my sexuality back for the same reason we talked about. It feels materialistic. I was into yoga at this time, and I knew that the yogis were saying that sex will lead you out of yourself, which can be good or bad. Good as long as you don't lose yourself in it. And I thought that sexuality was something that could easily pull everyone out of themselves. And what the Hawaiian Baby Woodrose consciousness told me through this channeling experience is that I am here to put the bone on people's nose. Feel how much we all want sex. We all want ecstasy. We all want to be put out of ourselves, but also feel the importance of not going into the ecstasy. Flying the cockpit of the plane when you need to fly the cockpit of the plane. And then once you've done your job, once you've gone and contributed to society, eat the bone, eat the treat on your nose, and fucking have yourself a good time, know, but make sure you're doing both, And it was through this channeling experience, particularly, where I was really, this particular experience tuned me into my sexual exploration phase, because what I had channeled and what I'd written is that I am an Egyptian magician princess. And what this thing was telling me was that I, 10,000 years ago, had been a little bit too strong on the protective instinct. I was like a Brahmin who protected a town or a village. And I never, because I was telling people to do good, be a good boy, and I was a yogi, and this Egyptian magician princess who was so bent on trying to make the world do good things and be a good boy and a good girl, I had done that at the expense of the dastardly ecstatic principle. What I understood from this channeling experience is that Dustin Cormier is a lesbian magician Egyptian woman incarnated into a man's body in order to give women an experience of the true erotic, or women and men, or whoever wants to have that erotic experience with me, while still aiming it at its sense of transcendental compassion for the planet and for everybody involved, so that we can eat each other a little bit, so that we can enjoy each other, but not actually consume each other and consume the planet and burn our whole planet in a bonfire for the sake of human greed and consumption. Because part of being human is eating the fruit, is going out and, sacrificing. Ideally, if you're like, the natives were all about, like, if you got to go and hunt an elk, you'll sacrifice it with respect to the earth and use every part of the elk, every piece of the elk, and try to make it sustainable. Be aware of how many elks you're taking. Use all the little bits of the elk, and try to even vivify that elk's spirit by taking its bones or its hide and using it in some way that you will remember the spirit of the elk. So humans have to eat. Man's got to eat. But we can do it in a way that's sustainable and channels a respect for the elements of the garden of cosmic consciousness that we've been given. And humans on this planet, really humans on every planet, are not going to figure that out until they grow up enough to have the kind of experiences that I've been having and that I've been talking about. So this Egyptian magician priestess in me, I think at some level, that's my deepest thing. I'm a protector. I care about people. I care about I'm so sentimental. I care about my sister and my brother and my mother and all my best friends. and I love them so much. And so if I truly love them, I have to protect them, not only by protecting them, like doing it all myself, but also granting them the transformative shamanic keys so that they can safely see the ghosts in their own psychic closet and invite themselves to be hardened and disciplined by that blue mystical flame of psychedelic ecstasy and that ecstatic principle on the whole. I wanted to invite that to them so that I wouldn't end up like that magician Egyptian Brahmin protector who spent her whole life not enjoying it. She had to do it for everybody else because no one else, like, she did it for them. I didn't want to be a person who protects people. I didn't want to just have kids and get a job and raise them well under some capitalist asshole's thumb and be a protector for just my own kin. Mm-hmm. I wanted to protect all of the people on planet Earth. And this is like, I don't know if this sounds like heavy or anything like that, but this is my journey.
Yeah.
This has been my whole trip. This is why I went through the psychedelic experiences. And eventually, this is why I started getting onto YouTube, because I knew that if I make a platform for myself, that I could incite these little seeds of this glimmering yin and yang, protection and ecstasy, finding center. I knew that I could make a platform where I could perpetuate this kind of consciousness. That's why I started doing How to Rock a Campfire, where I taught guitar. And when you watch a lot of my episodes, I talk about the lyrics of the songs that I'm singing, because I sing all songs from the 60s and 70s where they were doing the psychedelics. And I like to talk like, this Bob Dylan song here has this certain consciousness in mind. Bob Dylan's a psychedelic guy, although he doesn't, he's not big. Like, I know he's done mushrooms and acid and stuff when he was younger, but he's never been someone to talk about psychedelics are this great thing. But, I would still do his songs, and his songs reflect the era where people were engaging in this consciousness. That's why, one of the reasons why I started doing How to Rock a Campfire is because people would come play guitar with me, see the importance of that ecstasy, and also learn guitar.
Yeah.
It's like I was offering a service, but I was also had this element of perpetuating this evangelical psychedelic gospel through teaching guitar. And then eventually it became, I developed a channel called How to Rock Spirit, where I flat out talk about ecstasy, psychedelics, spirituality. And this all led me eventually to wanting to have a job that reflected on the consciousness that I was perpetuating. And that's why I went 4 years as an astrologer.
Okay.
Because astrology kind of represents really the same sort of thing. No one has actual physical proof other than observational statistics. You ask all the people who are Scorpios whether they feel like Scorpios after giving them a list of Scorpio qualities, they'll probably say yes. It's a placebo-y kind of thing, but this is just how astrology is. You got to experiment with yourself and see that you do feel like your planetary positions. But the point is that, astrology it comes from Vedic consciousness at its deepest root. And it represents something that goes against linear, rational, methodical evidence and science-based analysis. It takes a leap of intuition to experiment with it. This is my particular way of engaging the psychedelic things that we've been talking about in a way that I can actually make money off of it and make a living off of it. And that's why I'm now teaching astrology. I've been obsessed with it for like 6 years now. I went to school for it for 4 years. I'm in my 4th year now. And astrology is another platform where I talk about something that people are coming for. But when you come to my channel, you're going to get what you came for, plus a little bit of this Egyptian magician
Yeah. Deeper
sprinkle.
lesson. Yeah.
Yes. Whenever
Yeah.
I can fit it in there, anyway.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm also a Scorpio. I don't know my full chart because I don't know when, like, hour wise I was born.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but it's really interesting because obviously it's a fixed sign, and something I noticed, bringing it back to Hawaiian Baby Woodrose, the first
Yep.
time I did it. Funnily enough, I also had the idea to kind of describe what I was experiencing at the time. I wasn't.
Really?
That was my first experience. Wasn't as intense as yours because obviously you did like a whole extraction. This was literally just
Yep.
eating raw
Yep.
seeds.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Cool.
but yeah, I found that I was almost. In my experience, when you said about the spirit of the plant, it was interesting to me because I experienced seeing faces, like this one face that would keep repeating, and it was like a transparent kind of layer over everything I was seeing that had the kind of imprint of this face that I would see everywhere. And I sort of, in the experience, read that as the spirit of the plant, like that face
Right.
was something or, someone I didn't know at the time. I kind of
Totally.
read it as the spirit of the plant. So it's really interesting that you had that. For me, I tried to write song lyrics on Hawaiian Baby Red Roads. I got a couple of good lyrics. They were quite strange. I was talking about like tricksters and different things, black cats, a lot of symbolism.
Ah,
Um,
cool.
yeah,
Lovely.
and what's really annoying is that I threw out those lyrics because somebody had walked into the room and seen me kind of crazily scrawling in my, in the psychedelic
In your
experience, and
ecstasy. Yeah.
yeah, and been like, oh, what are you doing, man? And I felt like so ashamed, so I ripped them all up, put them in the bin. I only
Darn,
kept
too
a,
bad.
yeah, such a bummer. Um,
That's how it goes.
yeah, but a later point in my trip, because I'd played guitar for a while, tried to write lyrics on it. So I went back to my bed and I was just lying down, eyes closed, just thinking about like my life. And I really felt not drawn back necessarily in my experience to a past life. It was more like brought back to my childhood self, or a self that I was before my childhood kind of shaped me into who I am through different
Hmm.
events happening and different
Right.
influences coming in, just like the pure state. That I felt like
Yeah.
a bit of a return to that. So yeah, it's really interesting that you kind of also felt that in a way. Yeah.
Totally. And Hawaiian Baby Woodrose is an interesting one because it is such a, I would call it, it really caters towards, I think, the earth side of the equation. I was mentioning that there's the intelligence principle at the center of the Milky Way, which we are avatars experiencing.
Hmm.
And then our experience is going to be based on the biological suit that our brains need to process that intelligence through.
Yeah.
And each person's brain is bound to take up all of the evolutionary steps on Earth, from being one-celled microbes to being fish to being lizards to being squirrels to being monkeys to being human. And we all carry on our own individual path through evolution to what we are right now. And I think the Hawaiian Baby Woodrose are an earth-based psychedelic. Acid's more like that
Hmm.
intelligence principle from the center of the Milky Way galaxy. Even mushrooms are. Mushrooms also get to that human
Hmm.
intelligence principle. The Hawaiian Baby Woodrose in particular, I find, caters more to the earth. Earth, whenever I do Hawaiian Baby Woodrose, it's their earth is being channeled through the Hawaiian Baby Woodrose experience. It's compassionate. It makes me feel full of sentimental feelings of all the
Yeah.
humans on the world, of all the animals, of empathy. And I think that it channels the earth in some way, so that I've even had visions of, like, again, like I said, spirits or some kind of spirit of earth that's tapping on my thing and
Hmm.
saying, we are trying to get in touch with you humans with a particular urgency.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody's on this. Not everyone who does Hawaiian Baby Woodrose, I think, is going to be on this whole like Earth's dying and we need to figure that out trip. But I
Hmm.
think it does cater to that.
Yeah. I remember, I mean, at the time I wasn't necessarily in a great place and I'd kind of stopped appreciating things as deeply as I kind of used to. And I remember because I'd had my windows closed the entire trip, um, kind of at the end of the trip, it was quite long, maybe about 8 hours. And I went outside and opened up the curtains and walked out. And it was like a whole like new world, just a deeper and new appreciation for all of nature around me and like how beautiful the scenery was and the trees, everything, like the grass, every little thing. It really gave me a deeper appreciation for that. And I think that was where I found the most value in it. Yeah.
Totally, totally, because you don't realize what it's like, before you do psychedelics, you're like a fish in a fishbowl, and you don't realize that there's stuff outside that fishbowl, right?
Yeah.
And then when you look, at least if you get one eye outside that fishbowl, even when you go back into the fishbowl, you're going to be questioning.
Yeah.
I used to think about all of this as being all there is. Is it all there is? And that's why I can appreciate where you're coming from there, where you look outside, you see the sunlight coming through the trees and the plants and how they have conversations with each other. They get entangled with each other. The animals have conversations with the plants. And all these things of this conversation going on with creation that is easy to miss when you think that you are the only creator in the equation. When you are you're in a little vacuum of self-perception, and then you do psychedelics and then you just start questioning and thinking about all of it,
Yeah, definitely.
Very
Should we bring
cool,
it?
Oscar.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Should we bring it back to astrology? So you were talking about how the principles of intelligence and the earth kind of play into astrology. Do you think, because you talked about how you kind of combine psychedelics with yoga, which is something I've actually never done. I've kind of dipped into yoga, but I'm planning to get kind of more into it. How do you kind of view the kind of relationship between your sort of psychedelic experiences of like feeling earth energy and then also the zodiac, where you literally, talk about earth energies, water signs, like those different symbols? Do you see like much of a parallel between those?
I would say so.
Mm-hmm.
Astrology, really, for me, I actually got into it in order to disprove it. I'm a very scientifically minded person. And it's my scientific mind really that got me into psychedelics too, because everyone else is saying the evidence is conclusive, psychedelics are bad.
Yeah.
And I did a bit of psychedelics and I didn't have the same experience. And so I said, the scientist in me needs to see if everyone else is right. And then I experimented with it and found out that a lot of society was wrong about that. Astrology was the same way. There was this idea that because of the way the planets were at the time you were born, that they might reflect patterns or archetypes which are universal and everybody can experience them. And when the planets are lined up at the moment of our birth, our natal incarnation is aligned with the lights and vibrations coming in from those planets. That's how most people think of it. And I thought, okay, well, that's all cute, but I don't know. I think it's bogus. I thought astrology was stupid. And I had a few friends who kind of talked about it a little bit. And I was kind of like, okay, guys, spirituality is so much more than this silly astrology thing that you guys are trying to talk about, especially because I thought people were putting themselves in a box. Okay. Oh, you think you're a Scorpio because you were born in November, huh? Well, I bet I could read you all about a Gemini and tell you these are what a Scorpio is like. And then I'll read about Gemini and the person in the seat will say, oh yes, I relate with that, because it's all bullshit, right? And that's where I was at.
Right.
So what I did was I went to my local bookstore and I went to like Chapters. It's a bookstore in Canada, and they had various books on astrology. One of the ones that I was intrigued by, because there's, again, the sexual instinct is part of that ecstatic principle. There's a cool book out there and it's called Sextrology. And it talks about how the sexual nature of somebody's sign that they're born in. And so for me, I have a lot of Scorpio energy. For those watching who are interested in astrology, I'm Leo rising, and the rising sign, the planet that rules the rising sign, is going to be very loud in your energy. For me, since I'm a Leo rising, that's the sun. Leo rules the sun. So wherever the sun is in my chart, it's going to be louder and more emphasized than the sun might be for other people. You are a Scorpio, but you might not. It might not be as loud in your experience as someone like me who has a lot of Scorpio energy. But you might have other things going on in your chart that are louder in your experience.
Right.
So for me, I'm Scorpio sun, which is important for me as a Leo, and I have Mars and Pluto in Scorpio as well. So needless to say, these 3 planets out of the 12 planets could be in any one of these 12 signs. It's a funky bit of a lottery when all of these planets are lined at the same place. So not everybody's going to have the same experience that I did, but Scorpio is very loud in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this book about sextrology. And this book talks about things that are not subjective. Like I've got I don't know if you could see, but I've got very veiny arms.
Right.
They're long, wiry arms. And I can I have a strong grip, and I can be very I used to even have anger issues because I can be very aggressive and also very masculine, but receptive through masculinity. That's what they say about Scorpio. Scorpio is a fixed water sign. Water is empathic and intuitive, but it's fixed, which means its energy is very strong. And so I was reading about Scorpio, and at first I was like, okay, there's an interesting mythos going here that I can relate to. Then it started saying things like Scorpios tend to be muscular. They tend to have hairy legs. They tend to have a very snake-like spinal structure where their shoulders come back and their chest is kind of pronounced. They can usually have strong arms, and they can, they can also have a very sensitive genital area. And all of these things, especially with the veiny arms, the long wiry arms, the way that I have a long spine, and my spine feels very important to me.
Okay.
Among other things, I looked at all these qualities of a Scorpio, even that they can be possessive, and they can love very deeply. They're very sentimental. They tend to care a lot for their family. And for the people who are in their family. They're very sentimental and emotional while still trying to look powerful. And, I read all of these things, and I was I was blown away, really. To give it short thrift, I could not believe that I was reading things that were so true to my experience that were not true to other people's experiences. So I read about, my brother and my sister are both Geminis. What's cool about this particular sextrology book is that it describes the sun sign through the genders. So a male Scorpio is going to be different from a female Scorpio, especially because Scorpio it's technically a feminine sign, although it's ruled by Mars, which is masculine. So Scorpios can have a lot of machismo. They can be competitive because it's ruled by Mars, but they compete by doing things easily and gracefully and not looking like they tried too hard. When it comes to competition with trying to get a woman, a Scorpio is not going to come right out and try to make a big flashy deal. Scorpio is going to try to win by sinking into the back of the room, looking cool, wearing clothes that put off the vibration that they're putting out there, and they attract. They go by attracting. They attain by attracting, just like all the other water signs do. But Scorpio in particular is Mars wanting to compete against the other people and win by this attraction. That's how I really proliferate a lot of my romantic energy in a lot of ways. Not necessarily that anything's a competition, but if anyone's interested in me, I'm putting it on, and I want to show that I'm a capable lover just like anybody else is. So I saw all these things about Scorpio, and for me, I felt so deeply attuned to them all that, I started looking at other people's signs. My sister is a Gemini woman. My brother is a Gemini man. My mother is a Virgo woman. My father is a Virgo man. And I read about them all, and it seemed to me like there was nothing placebo about how similar the psychological backdrop and the mythos, the writers of this book talk about the mythos of these archetypes, Why is Scorpio like Scorpio is? Why is Virgo like Virgo is? They relate it mostly to Greek mythology and these characters that you see being played out. The character of Scorpio is Hades. Hades is opposite Taurus, which is like Persephone. Hades is this winter planet that wants to love in an all-consuming, obsessive way, but they don't want to squash or put out the fire of that which they love by being so possessive. Hades and Taurus are this classic duality where Scorpio is like the ultimate principle of absolute compulsive obsession. And Taurus is this principle of Persephone, of spring, of possessing by not working so hard to possess it, by making it easy. And I fell in love with a Taurus girl at some point, and I tried to get her in my palm and tried to possess her. And she was always like, if you want to possess me, you have to let me be myself. You have to let me go about. I'm not going to go with you just because you need me so bad. I'm going to connect with you, and you have to just find some way to control that in a way. Because it's cute. Scorpio's possessive thing is cute, but if it's overblown, then the other person feels like they are kept under glass. Like the
smothered kind of.
Yeah, like Beauty and the Beast is I think metaphorical of Scorpio too. There's this rose inside the glass, and the beast is trying to keep it protected. And this girl represents this thing that you can't really. It's like youth. You can't protect it. You just got to let it be what it is, So it was through trying to disprove astrology that I got so into it. And eventually, like I said, the reason why it was so connected to my experience was because there is no proof behind it. It is something mystical. And this is why India has perpetuated astrology for so long. Like 3,000 years. It's in their Vedic texts, which have been written 6,000 years ago, which is something that I didn't really know until I got into Vedic astrology, which is really a pretty natural transition for me because I was already obsessed with India and Indian yoga by doing yoga and by the Beatles, basically. The Beatles and George Harrison got me into yoga. And George Harrison, when he was in his heyday, he went and bought 300 copies of a very important book. And this book is called The Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And that I read that about 2012. I've got it somewhere. I don't have my copy on me, I don't think. But it's somewhere in my book.
Yeah,
that little slapdash pile of books over there. And I actually went, I was inspired by this. When I had a bit of money around like 2013, around the time I started doing YouTube, I actually went and I paid $300 and bought 30 of those books.
Wow, okay.
And I just gave them out to people.
Okay.
That book I still recommend to anybody who's interested in a scientifically derived appreciation for all things mysticism. Autobiography of a Yogi is the closest and furthest that you'll ever get and go, in my opinion.
Okay. I'll have to give it a read. I haven't read it.
It's really something very special and fantastic. But you seem like Oscar. You're kind of already in it. This is a book that I give to people who are asking questions, who are in the protective instinct and are fascinated by what's outside of it. I always start with that particular book, and it's transcendental mysticism first, which for me was a great gem to hold on to when I got into psychedelics.
Do you have the same thing you're saying about how you kind of want to be like sort of bringing elements of the psychedelic experience to people through your videos of, about music and sort of playing it into that? Do you feel the need to kind of bring astrology and that kind of the mystic kind of things as well to people? Do you feel like you kind of need to do that? Yeah.
Mystic, yes. Mystic, but not necessarily astrology.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, astrology is my pet fun thing that I
Right.
love. It's it's
Mhm.
it's that is a dimension of my ego,
Oh,
not
okay.
necessarily a dimension of a spirituality or a wisdom that everybody ought to abide by.
Right. Okay.
That's a Dustin Cormier specific thing.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I would even say when people come to my astrology videos, they are getting that essence of Dustin that we've been talking about. My
Mhm.
astrology videos are just like my guitar videos. People come here for a specific purpose and they're left with something slightly more.
So that's
That's
the aim. Yeah.
yeah, I would say yeah, that is the aim. Although, man, I'm getting older and time's going by and I would like to be able to live a comfortable life. YouTube is an incredible way to do it because it's residual income.
Yeah.
I've been putting so much time into all these videos and now I'm making like 250 bucks once a month from the advertisements on all my YouTube videos. And I feel good about getting that money because I'm contributing to society by providing knowledge, which is a valuable item of commerce. I put in a bunch of effort. I make this value essentially universally available. That's my
Yeah.
favorite way to do things.
Hmm.
I'm not really into the idea of making my own school of astrology where you pay me and I give you my particular perspective. I like to just put it all out there for free with a nice little donation hat
Right.
at the
Yeah.
end.
Hmm.
And I have faith that if I do that enough, people are going to be like, there's going to be people in the world who say, oh my God, how does this guy not asking for more for what he's putting out there? And
Hmm.
that's the pocket that I'm looking for people to, that's the pocket where I'm looking to get my success.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm really much more interested in success than I am in wealth.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, also, it's kind of way back in the conversation, you kind of mentioned getting into Krishna. What kind of led you to that sort of side of like mysticism and culture?
Krishna is an interesting one. I would say that really reeling back to my ecstatic wine baby woodrose trip. I mean, I took like comparative religion in high school
Okay.
and I saw glimmers of what Hinduism is, what Sufism is, what paganism is, and
Hmm.
all these sorts of things because I was in a Catholic high school and I'm very thankful that there was a class in my Catholic high school dedicated to comparative anthropological religions.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was always very interested in anthropology and philosophy.
Yeah.
So I did that very deep Hawaiian baby woodrose trip around 2010, 2011, about 2 years after high school. And after that, I had this mind obliterating experience. And religion was just another way where there was a pattern set before me, which was Christianity and Catholicism, which is Canada's presiding religiosity. That was my pattern. And I said, okay, great. I know a lot about Christianity. I know about the Christian New Testament and the Bible and all these things just because I've always been a little bit of a religious person, although I like to think of myself as more scientific
Hmm.
first and religious second. Well, there's just how I am and how my experience of life has been. I apply science to my essential backbones of religion, and I
Okay.
apply religion to my essential backbones of science. Like they're really both there, and they never take over one or the other, as long as it's not dogmatic.
Hmm.
So, out of an interest of going outside of the dogmatic parameters of the cultural religion that I'd been handed, I said, okay, I will appreciate the cultural religion that I've been handed if I also experience other religions and see them in context. Otherwise, you're like the guy in Kentucky that's sitting with his bottle of beer saying, you know what? I think Kentucky is the best place in the world,
Yeah,
even though he's
yeah.
never been anywhere else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so that's why I started to just try to see outside those lines. Uh, and this is really what got me in. Like this is at the time when I was reading about the Beatles
Hmm.
and doing like getting into psychedelics and smoking weed, seeing that the Beatles reflected this consciousness. I really love Jimi Hendrix, and there's a very
Yeah.
well-known picture of Jimi Hendrix. I think it's one of his albums where he's sitting like this, and he's got four arms, and he's got all the psychedelic ecstatic faces of all the Hindu pantheon coming out of his face. One of them being like Krishna. He's supposed to be the Vishnu Krishna, but there's
Yeah.
blue-faced people and deities coming out of Jimi Hendrix.
Is that the album with Castles Made of Sand?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think so. I think I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I can't think of the name of it. It's not
No,
Are You Experienced?
No.
It might just be a poster.
Okay.
Might
Yeah.
just be a poster. My brain's sticking on it right now. But
Yeah. Same.
I saw that image, needless to say. And these all were just these little peppered things which reflected on my experience of that Hawaiian Baby Woodrose trip. Static, sort of like don't hold on to anything about anything thing. And it was at this time that I started feeling things out, and I don't know how I got wind of it, but George Harrison, I think I was reading a book on George Harrison. It's called Dark Horse. And he talks a little bit about his religiosity and stuff like this. And that whole book, his whole thing that he's leaning on the whole time, he's hitting it bang, 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 as he talks about his respect and his love, his appreciation, and how much his life changed when he read Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. So I was just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to see the bones of the bones that I'm reading about, and I'm going to read this Autobiography of a Yogi book. It's by a guy named Paramahansa Yogananda. It's the story of a young Indian fella who was always mystical since he was young. His parents wanted him to get a good job and stuff like that, and instead he ditched his family and followed his ecstatic impulse towards what he thought was a guru who was calling to him.
Okay.
He could have gotten a job and gone to school just like all the other kids in the 1900s, or this is like late 1800s, 1890 he was born. It's the early 1900s. His parents are telling him to get a job, and he thought, no, instead I'm just going to be a beatnik and a bum and go and talk to all the saints and rishis and sadhus and Hindus in India, because he was in India. And he talked to a lot of people, developed very mystical and magical consciousness. And there was a point where he just went on his intuition to go to a certain place. He didn't know why, but he went to this certain place in India. I think it's Benares, India, something like that. And he went to a certain corner, and he walked down this alleyway, and there was standing this man who with a beard and who unfolded his arms and said, "Mukunda, I've finally found you." And It was the face of the man that he had in his brain of being this guru person. There was no other communication for him. He just found this man who was the man in his brain, and the man was there with outstretched arms saying, "I'm your guru." And that's just one of the many mystical things that goes on in this book. And long story short, like, that's an incredible book. He hangs out with this guru in this hermitage, and his guru teaches him about the depths of the Vedas, the depths of the Indian lore, which there's so much written that you need somebody to give you the most important bits. Or else, the Mahabharata is so big that I don't have enough roof space to carry how big the book is. So nobody can go through even half of the Mahabharata in one lifetime. There's books written about the books, written about the books, written about the books. So you need a good guru who's condensed it all into a diamond. And he talks about the diamond that is Indian spirituality and mysticism through the vantage of his guru, Sri Yukteswar. And Yogananda basically experienced everything that his guru had to show him, one of them being astrology. His guru is a famous astrologer who's still respected in Indian astrology to this day. And he also had many experiences of, like, his guru was the yang principle and the divine mother principle of the protection instinct. He wanted to protect Yogananda, but how he did it was doing it how I'm talking about, by throwing them into the ecstatic fire of transformative experiences. So he would tell Yogananda, like, all right, here's your next mission. Go out into the desert for 40 days with no food and see how you do. Yogananda was like, what? And he's like, yeah, get going. The next bus is coming soon. Like shit like this. And so he would go to the desert by himself, and he would find fruits there. He would find things where he could stay alive and survive, and he would be forced to fast, forced to let go of his attachment to food. And he trusted that his guru knew what he was doing, and that his guru was the arbiter of an even deeper deity watching over him. And he got through it. He made it through that little trial and came back and respected his guru and launched himself into things like this through his guru. It's actually a beautiful thing. That hardly ever happens these days in the way that it happened for Yogananda.
Yeah.
And it was all of this kind of thing that I eventually, in this book, it talks about how the Bhagavad Gita is like the condensation of the Mahabharata, which is this big, long, epic compendium of Vedic knowledge. There's a book that's this big comparatively, and it's called the Bhagavad Gita. And what it means is the Song of God. And I could talk with you forever about that particular book.
Yeah.
I would even like the two things that I vibed on for my whole life was Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, which is really a gem, a condensed diamond of the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
It's Yogananda's description of this book. And the Bhagavad Gita is the condensed diamond of all Indian spirituality and lore.
Is that written by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada? I might be pronouncing that wrong.
Swami Prabhupada might have done a version of the Bhagavad Gita. He actually he did another book that is a condensed diamond in the same way that Yogananda's is.
Right.
He did a very important book called the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Oh, okay. Right.
That might be the one that you're thinking of, which is that's a very important one. That's kind of the last book written by Vyas, which is this disembodied Sanskrit intelligence that they call Vyas. The Mahabharata was written by Vyas. The Bhagavad Gita was written by Vyas, and the Srimad Bhagavatam is written by Vyas. And it was the last thing that he wrote, quote unquote, before he left onto the whatever other planet he has to transmit this message through. It's real avatar consciousness, almost as if the human intelligence agency at the center of the Milky Way galaxy has flicked out avatars like Jesus, like Yogananda, like the lineage of gurus that comes from them, including this Vyas character, who has this compendium of transcendental psychedelic wisdom that they perpetuate on every planet that comes through, with growing human consciousness. This is the idea of it for them. It's like a prophet of the great intelligence of God that is all omnipotent and permeating. It's the scientist in me is kind of like, I got to use this language, but it's
that's the belief.
But the religionist in me knows that that's what the language is, and that is that's my understanding of it. Just one of these things where you're not going to experience the reality of this inherent intelligence, wisdom that pervades the universe until you experience spirituality in its writings for yourself through the words of people who have experienced it themselves. Until you try to get in touch with it your own way, anybody could talk about how it's religious and therefore not scientific, it's these silly make-believe things. Certain things in the world of mysticism could always still seem like make-believe, even though those who are imbibing the Kool-Aid know what's really going on.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how you want to deal with that.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, we just took a quick break. Dustin, do you want to talk a little bit about your band?
Thank you, Oscar. That sounds great. I appreciate all of this, man. You're a really good presenter.
Thank you.
So, music has always been a very important connection to all of this ecstasy versus form, patterns, and principles thing. I'm blessed because my whole family is musical, and me and my brother have been playing music together since, like, I got my brother into it around 2013.
Okay.
And this was part of the thing that started to get him on his path in life, is having things to do that are enjoyable, that you can have fun with, but that are also something that you do have to be disciplined and serious about. As disciplined as you ought to be in order to bring the most out of the playfulness. So, so I've always been a bit of a musician. My whole family's musical, and I started off first wanting to be in a band with. I was in a band called the Goombas. We
Okay.
got one album out called Moonshine, and it was a wonderful time. But it didn't. Eventually, I began to feel like this isn't quite the consciousness that I want to express. And it was difficult to work with the guys that I had found in order to make that album happen. We're all good guys. It's just that, they're good guys and there's no bad blood. But creatively subsisting through something like creating music and being in a band for all that time with the same people, it needs to be business savvy and true, but it also needs to be heartfelt, and you need to all jive together in a way that feels good, because that's what's going to carry the business as far as it can. So eventually at some point, I got in a band with my brother. At first it was my brother just had, like, he worked very hard and he got enough money through doing his jobs as like in unions as a construction laborer type thing. We had our house. He saved up to get like another house for himself, and now he's just beaten down the mortgage on that. It's full of renters, which means that the renters pay the money for his house. So he's got enough extra money, and he wanted to do an album, and it's his own songs that he'd written. It was called Chicks for Tricks, off the Back Nine, kind of punky ska type music.
Okay, nice.
And I wanted him to get a band. So I was like, fuck it. Originally, I was like, well, dude, I'll play bass for you so that you can get something. I'll even go with you and we'll make an album together. But they were all Sean's songs, which I was okay with, because I wasn't sure if this band was the band that I really wanted to move through. The band was called Bosom. How that band name came is that Sean was really high on MDMA one day, and it came from like a guttural mouth utterance. He said, "Guys, I've got it. I want my band name to be called Bosom." And we were like, "Okay, you mean like tits, right? Like titties, like bosom, right?" And he's like, "Yes, but I want it to be a 4-letter word, an acronym, BUSM." Bosom.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, so what does the acronym mean?" And he said, "I don't know. We can make something up, but it has to be a 4-letter word, bosom." And I thought it was silly at first, but it just grew on us. And so we've decided to call it Big Up Sour Mash, because it's a combination of many different things. We try not to stick to one genre or influence. And we made this album, had a lot of fun with it. It was mostly basically Sean's songs that us and a drummer that we hired on Kijiji. His name's Michael. He lived around us in Oshawa. He just decided to be along for the ride because it would help him get his drum chops up, and we'd make an album and his name would be on it, and it's all Gucci. We made that first album where Sean was mostly doing all the songwriting and stuff. I at some point I was in 2 bands at once. I was with Sean's band and the Goombas. And the Goombas were this psychedelic band that were more close conceptually to what I wanted to do. I thought that I could put my seed of ecstatic psychedelic consciousness through the Goombas more than I could through Bosom. Even though Sean's my brother, and Bosom, is, the people in Bosom are more malleable than the people in the Goombas, but I didn't realize that. I thought the concept of psychedelics were closer to the Goombas, less punky, more like consciousness. And so at some point I let go of Bosom and said, Sean, we made our album together. Take your drummer, go find a bass player and keep it going because you should. And they actually were just like, Dustin, you are our bass player. We want you in the band. We'll look around for one, but we would really love for you to stay in the band. And I was like, I appreciate that, but I just got to explore elsewhere and go fully with the Goombas. Started focusing fully on the Goombas. And I found that even though they were conceptually right, the people in the band, I had a difficult time asserting my songwriting ideas into that band. They are psychedelic people too, in a way, but again, they're all good guys. It's just, I couldn't get my ideas out to them because they didn't take a lot of them seriously. Because I'm a goofy guy. And a lot of them were serious, and it was hard for me to get my ideas out to them. So at some point, we did acid on stage in Sudbury one day, which is like 6 hours north. And I did something on stage that was just like, I don't know, I was playing with my foot, and my stomping foot pushed the carpet that we were standing on into my guitarist's guitar pedals. And he got angry. We were both on acid, and he got angry and said something on the mic. It was just like something that like, it felt degrading to me. He didn't really mean it, but like at that moment I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
It was just a thing that happened. I knew it at that moment. And when we got home, I broke with the Goombas. I had put a lot of time and money into them. And you know, it didn't matter because I just felt that there was this growing darkness where these guys weren't really perpetuating or looking to perpetuate the consciousness that I wanted to perpetuate. Not that they were mean or anything, but that I knew that I had to strong arm anything creatively with them. I remembered Bosom, and I went to Bosom and I said, you know, they had tried a few different bass players, but nothing was really sticking. So I came to them one day and said, boys, you know, I just want you to know I've been writing some songs, and I think that you guys are an okay fit for it. It just means that we might have to change the concept of Bosom from a punk thing to be a little bit more dark, erotic, mystical, consciousness experience. But we could still keep the fun of Bosom and kind of show people a good time on stage because that's what we want to do. And that's especially Sean's Gemini thing. Sean writes a song we just put out is called Sticky Magazine. It's all about jerking off and keeping yourself having a good time. And then so I wrote a song to match that called Can't Be Bothered. And it's all about I can't be bothered by these times. I can't be bothered by the life that I'm living in and the world and the way society is. And so it's still a kind of a punky tune, and it's very riff heavy. And it was my consciousness. And the boys were just like, what else you got? You know, give it all to us, Dustin. And the other band wasn't doing that. They had songwriters that were perpetuating their consciousness, and I was getting in the way of theirs. With Bosom, Sean and Mikey were begging me to add my creative contribution. So we became a three-headed dragon. Yeah. Mike, I always say, is like the body of this dragon. And then my brother and I are the two songwriters. Mm-hmm. And as a band, we let each other get each other's thing out. When I have a mystical, dark, erotic song, it might not be Sean's thing, but he'll see it through. When Sean has a funky little punk song that's just like about dick and fart jokes or something, he has some he works profundity within what's silly on the surface. Yeah. So that's how we did it. We're going to do 5-song EPs. Some of the songs will be mine and some of the songs will be Sean. Ultimately, it's going to be both of us doing a little bit of everything within all of it. Yeah. And that became the right modality for me, where I could actually, because my brother is my brother, so he'll let me do really whatever I want. And we all got together and became a band based on that camaraderie. Yeah. And we've been doing it since about 2016. We've recently, this year in 2021, we're putting out 5 singles. We worked with a whole bunch of different producers, and now we finally made music we're happy with. We've put out 5 new songs in 2021. We got 5 new ones already recorded to be released in 2022. And we've got a big music video coming out on October 22nd.
Okay,
We're
so there's
very
a lot
excited about.
lot in the works.
Yes, yeah, we're cooking for sure, man.
Yeah.
It's Go
So
ahead, Oscar. Yep.
yeah. So now you're in like obviously Bosom, you're saying you have like more creative freedom. What is your kind of songwriting process with that kind of total freedom? Where do you kind of
Yeah.
start?
Well, oftentimes what I like to do is I like to write a song starting from what my friend Austin, he's our producer, he calls it a
Okay.
neck turn. It's where it's a different part of the song that's different from everything else to add contrast. And then you slide back into the main groove after the little hook. A hook is another word for it. So what I do is I write songs with like, I start from the hook and I work my way out. And most of the songs that I've written for Bosom, my creative process is basically that, I'll be high on psychedelics sometimes,
Right.
or I'll just be smoking weed. Usually when I write anything, it's always it's annoyingly it's an annoying distraction from what I'm supposed to be doing. For
Okay,
example,
yeah.
if I'm at my job and I'm supposed to be like, I was doing construction for a bit where I'm looking around and like my boss leaves me to use a hammer and strip all these little 2x2s off of a wall and then clean out all the staples and then wipe it clean so we can put a new poster or something like that on it. So he leaves me in a corner with a hammer to pull all these things off. And I've got a pen and a piece of paper in my pocket.
Right.
Kind of looking around, just sort of like no one's looking.
Yeah.
Here's this brilliant fucking song I made.
Yeah.
Always how it happens. If I
Yeah.
sit down with my joint and a coffee and a piece of paper and I say, okay, it's time to write a song, it never happens that way.
Fair enough. Yeah. It's hard to be intentional with it sometimes. Yeah.
It is. Although there's some times where like I never plan it. I can't plan a date with writing a song. All I can do is give myself days where it's like, okay, I'm doing nothing, but I'm going to do some yoga today. And then I'm going to probably do some YouTube videos, right? So I give myself a wide span of creative time and space. And I start noodling towards a YouTube video and I'll write something. I'll be like, this is kind of an interesting thought that I'm building on here. And I'll take that and I'll write it down and then I'll have a song in my head. And I'll be like, yeah, okay. And then I'll start writing lyrics that reflect the consciousness. Usually, there's a classic thing. Some people write the lyric content first, and some people write the music first. I always think that the same writer ideally should do both, although not always. Some people can do some cool Frankenstein things. But for me, I like it when the tone of the song lyrically matches the tone of the song musically. One of the ones I've written recently is called Pretty Kitty.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a BDSM style of song.
Yeah.
I wrote it for my girlfriend because she likes to be my sweet little submissive pretty kitty. And I knew that there would be women and men in the audience who would appreciate me orchestrating a song as the master and them being the submissive.
Right. Okay.
So because like that's the vibe me and my girlfriend often get at. Although sometimes we even switch it. She switched too. So sometimes I'm the pretty kitty and she's the hot lady with the whip.
Right.
I mean, like this is just how we are sometimes. It's not all that wild and crazy all the time, but there's times where we get in a mood, and I wanted to write that song based on that idea. So I had a riff in my head. This is just sometimes it's got to be start one or the other. And the riff I had in my head was like do this driving sort of pushing kind of song. And I had that going in my brain. It was the song first, but I was listening to the song and I was experiencing this very new and exciting sexual relationship with my girlfriend at the time. And I was like, I'd like to, I was thinking that I'd like to write a song that reflects on that. And I had this riff in my head. So I sat down and I got the riff out. And then I started putting a melody towards it. And the melody came out with the words that I was riffing on. And I always lead it from the chorus. I had this whole chorus of like, whoa, Pretty kitty, you better come to me, pretty kitty. That's the chorus. And I wrote the lyrics to fit the chorus. And I knew it was going to come back to this driving verse. And then so I just I just matched it. So I wrote the chorus first, but then I knew that the verse would lead to the chorus. So then I wrote the verse, wrote the lyrics to the verse, led into the chorus, and then I wrote another verse that led into another chorus. And then I had a cool musical breakdown that I knew I needed to have something different. So I just wrote, there's a cool breakdown in that song that happens after the second verse. That's just how that particular song unfolded. Sometimes it's a poem first and the music gets put to it. Sometimes it's a song and the poem comes out of the music.
Yeah. Well, so we've been going for quite a long time. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you online? We've kind of touched on it throughout, but do you want to summarize?
Sure. Thank you, Oscar. I'm going to tell you, buddy, you are so good at what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
I'm honored to have been a part of this podcast experience.
I'm honored to have had you on. Honestly,
you, man.
Thank you.
You're great at what you do. You listen very well, and you are that kaleidoscope. I can tell that all the questions that you ask are coming from the same source of ecstatic freedom that I'm talking about. So it's a real pleasure to have done this with you.
You too, absolutely. It was so interesting to hear about just everything. Yeah.
Good. I'm so glad. So my name is Dustin Cormier. You can find me on my website. It's dustincormier.net. And basically I have four different YouTube channels that are my big thing that I've got going on. How to Rock a Campfire on YouTube, where I teach guitar. How to Rock Spirit, where I do general spirituality podcasts, sort of similar to what you do with Kaleidoscope Cafe. I have How to Rock Astrology, where I teach astrology. And then I've got a YouTube channel called Dustin Cormier. I've got some original music on there. And as well, I just put out a music video a cheap one that I made with some friends, just by myself, as well as some other fun acting things and things like that on there. Basically, if you go on dustincormier.net, you'll be able to find all of my situations that I've got going on. I'd say that's the best way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming on.
My pleasure, Oscar. This was a real fun time with me, and I really needed it. I kind of needed just like a reaffirming of all the things that I've got going on. So Thank you for being that person.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yes, you deserve it, buddy. And I hope that you do very well with this podcast. I'm very happy to have been a part of it.